Hi, I'm Bernadette Tacey with Alliance Defending Freedom, and we're out in D.C. today, close by the Supreme Court, because today is oral argument day in Dobbs versus Jackson Women Health Organization. And it's a case that could overturn Roe versus Wade, because life is a human right, and we want to see our rights restored back to the unborn. Now, we have a show set up for you today. We're going to be live streaming from here. We have several guests today lined up for you from this rooftop, but also we have the rally that's going to be streaming. We have actual oral arguments for you, and we have pro-life content that we're going to have ready for you today. But first, with me today is CEO and President of Alliance Defending Freedom, Mike Ferris. Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Bernadette. Great to be with you.
Well, first, we're going to start off by saying you have probably been out here at the pro-life movement on the front lines longer than anybody else that's out here today. Now, what has changed about the pro-life movement since we've started?
Well, the growth of the pro-life movement is certainly notable. I'm probably not the oldest, but I'm close. I've been here for a long time. The growth and the number of young people that are involved really is remarkably changed. And so it's just a great thing, because I would say probably the majority of people who will be here today weren't alive when Roe versus Wade was decided. And just the fact that that's picked up and people are understanding it better and better, and the movement is broader. We're in a stronger position nationally to be pro-life than we've been in a long time. What
does this moment represent to you?
Well, it's the opportunity for a true sea change. We talk about generational wins at ADF, that in the area of life, we want Roe versus Wade reversed, but that's just kind of a huge milestone along the path to becoming a pro-life nation, so that life is protected in all 50 states. And we know that's going to take some time, but the first step in that long process is to get Roe versus Wade off the books so that states can once again protect life. And it was wrongly decided back in the 70s, and it's wrongly decided now, and it needs to be reversed.
What makes it bad legal precedent? We hear that all the time. What makes Roe versus Wade bad legal precedent?
Well, the simplest answer is there's no right to abortion found in the Constitution. And they just made it up out of thin air. And judges are not supposed to be legislators. The basic rule of America is found in Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution. So Congress has all the legislative power in the country. The founders believed that was so important. They put it up front. It's not the First Amendment. It's not the Second Amendment. In fact, the operative words there is amendment. That was a change. The first rule of our country was Congress makes all laws. The Supreme Court's not supposed to make laws. And they made up Supreme Court precedent out of thin air and gave us Roe versus Wade. If you read the original decision, it reads like a statute at the end. It doesn't read like a court decision. They say, well, in the first trimester this, in the second trimester that. They're not getting that out of the text of the Constitution. They're just making stuff up. And so it's an act of tyranny, the founders believed, when anyone other than the people themselves or their elected legislators make law. Well, that's the fundamental problem with it. Then, of course, the morality of it is deeply flawed. And the spirit of the 14th Amendment, and the Fifth Amendment for that matter, says that no person shall be denied life without due process of law. And in 1868, when the 14th Amendment was enacted, there was a clear scientific and legal consensus that unborn children were persons for the purposes of protecting their right to life. So the correct decision in Roe versus Wade should have been, they're persons. Why does anybody think that we can kill them? And so it's just flawed from the beginning, and that fundamental flaw has never been purged by any passage of time.
Can you describe the Mississippi law for us and why it's uniquely positioned to potentially overturn Roe?
Well, the strategy behind the Mississippi law was to challenge a follow-up decision of Roe versus Wade. And that is the court in Planned Parenthood versus Casey in the early 90s changed from the trimester system of Roe versus Wade to a viability system of the Planned Parenthood case. And so 15 weeks was chosen for the Mississippi law to be pre-viability and to be able to challenge the viability standard. And we thought that was the opening wedge to taking down Roe, but we thought it would be a two-step process. Now, as it turns out, because of the changes on the court personnel, frankly, that there's a chance, in the Attorney General of Mississippi, to her great credit, made the decision that we're not going just for the viability standard, because the best argument against the viability standard entirely is Roe was wrong in the first place. And so they're swinging for the fences today. And that's to their great credit, and the courage of Attorney General Lynn Fitch and her Solicitor General Scott Stewart should not be underestimated. They've done a courageous thing here, and it's what will protect both women and children.
Absolutely. Now, one last question for you. What message do you have for our audience today?
Pray. The argument will be today, but there will be a conference later this week, probably on Friday, where the court will preliminarily decide the case, and someone will be assigned to write the decision. The judge that's the most senior on the court, that's voting on the winning side, gets to assign who the decision is, assuming that the Chief Justice is not voting on the winning side. If the Chief Justice votes on the winning side, then he gets to decide who writes the opinion. So the opinion will be assigned, but that's not the end. That's the beginning, because there's always politicking that goes on between judges afterwards, and there will be an effort to move votes after that. So we need people to pray until the decision is released. We need people to pray. Now, we'll be praying after the decision is released, but the specific request will change. So until that decision is released, probably in late June, we will need to be on our knees praying that the right thing happens by the Supreme Court of the United States. And so up until, if you've seen this live, pray for the oral argument. Pray that Scott Stewart, the Solicitor General of Louisiana, who will argue the case, will answer all the questions well, will have clear, concise, effective answers and arguments. And it's not inappropriate to pray that the other side doesn't do quite as well. And so I've argued in the Supreme Court, and I have felt the power of prayer during arguments. So I would encourage people to get on their knees and pray for all of this today.
All right, we will be doing that all throughout the day today. Thank you so much, Mike, for being here with us. Now, we're going to cut to Attorney General Lynn Fitch. She gave remarks earlier today, and we're going to cut to that right now.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here on this very historic day. Thank you for all that you've done for over 5 decades to get us to this day. And today we turn the page on Roe v. Wade. We start a new chapter in American history, and we do it together. We are going to leave behind that false premise that for some reason abortion is the answer to a level playing field for women. We leave that behind. Our ability to succeed is not built on the death of innocent children, but our success is our own. Over the past 50 years, we've worked very diligently. We have redefined the workplace. We have created our own professional success, and we've truly changed the culture. We've made it much easier for women to be a part over the last 50 years of the workplace and to balance our family life as well.
That's right.
We're creating a culture. That's right. Women can have it all.
That's right.
And we mean all women.
Yes.
We're in this together.
That's right.
It's important that we know that no longer is the abortion the answer to the question to how do we help those who face extraordinary circumstances. Abortion is not the answer, but those who have suffered, who are in poverty, who don't have any job training, have no skill sets, or in an abusive relationship, or don't have a support network. We change that because society has too long answered with abortion. But today we commit loudly and boldly that we will no longer sell them that lie.
That's right.
We're here today to defend the fundamental dignity of women and their children.
That's right.
And we mean all women, all children. You know, for 50 years, this court has pitted women against their children.
That's right.
Pitted woman against woman.
That's right.
It's time that we assert that we will no longer accept that false choice. We are here today to empower women and promote life. That's our message to the justices, and that's our message to the world. Thank you. May God bless each of you. Blessings as we move forward. Thank you. Thank you. Thank y'all. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kelvin Cochran, former fire chief of the city of Atlanta, and I've been an advocate for religious liberty for the last 10 years, easy. The Dobbs case is such a major benchmark for us in the United States of America, those of us who stand for life. And so in this historical opportunity that we have as a nation, I want to offer up a prayer to Almighty God for what's about to take place. Let's pray together. Dear God, our Heavenly Father, how we praise you and thank you for your sovereignty. According to your holy word, all the days of our lives were written in your book before even one of them came to be. It's just one of many convictions and statements of where you stand as it relates to life. You predestined us even before the foundation of the earth. So Father, we have this opportunity this week to reverse something that has occurred for over 50 years now, that we can restore order as it relates to the sanctity of life. So we pray, dear God, that you would move in the hearts of the justices and that you would give them clarity of thought, and that they would, by your Spirit, you will filter out any political or outside influences that are beyond the truth of your holy word. We pray, Heavenly Father, that the team of the Attorney General of Mississippi, Lynn Finch, and the Solicitor General who will present the case will provide wise counsel and guidance with clarity and with conviction that will pierce the hearts of the justices. We pray, Heavenly Father, that moms who are wrestling with a decision for life after an unplanned pregnancy would choose life, said that your plan for their precious baby will be manifested here in the earth. We thank you for the advocates for life who've labored over the last 50 years, and we rejoice in the hope that will be the outcome of what you have set this week up for the last 50 years. We glorify your name and all the efforts that we have put into this effort on tomorrow, and we worship you and praise you that you will be glorified. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Welcome back. We have Lori Cassio of Students for Life of America and two students from Mississippi. They traveled all the way to D.C. for this. Thank you guys so much for being here today. Lori, I want to start with you. How many students do you have out here today?
So there's probably a couple hundred, and about 50 or so of them, including these lovely ladies from Jackson, stayed overnight to reserve the pro-life movement's rally space. So they've been here up all night on the ground, and more students are coming in as we speak.
Now, we've seen quite a shift among our generation, among the younger generations. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So Students for Life, we have campus displays. We get out on the ground, and we're seeing hundreds, thousands of minds changed across the country. And, all it takes is a conversation. So we just need to keep that up, keep that momentum going, keep the conversations going, because when you put life in the light and put abortion in the light, it's hard to hide the truth that it ends a human life.
Absolutely. Well, it's so important for you guys to be here today as well. Can you tell us your name and where you're from?
I'm Delia Tettleby, and I go to Clinton, from Clinton. I go to Mississippi College.
And I'm Laura Lane, and I also go to Mississippi College.
All right. Now, why is it so important for you to travel out here today?
Sorry. We've been doing a lot of community activism out in Jackson, and so, just being here in DC is kind of the climax of what we've been doing all year, just preparing Jackson and just our nation for a post-Roe v. Wade future. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for being out here. Now, what has SFLA been up to surrounding Dobbs?
So much. So we started a bus tour in Jackson, brought it all the way up to Supreme Court, made stops along the way at colleges, even CNN's headquarters to get them to talk about this. I know, so it's been fun. And we've had different speakers, students come out, there's been live ultrasounds. So it's a lot of getting the conversation going and then organizing students to stay overnight. There's a lot that goes into that. There's a watch party live in Jackson. So a lot's going into this. So we're really, seeing the pro-life movement come together, ADF, Students for Life America, and everyone else. It's great.
Why is it so important? Why is this case, Dobbs versus Jackson, why is it so important to you?
Well, this is the biggest pro-life Supreme Court case that I've seen in my entire life, that I'm sure we've all seen in our entire life. It has the ability to reverse Roe v. Wade come June. So fingers crossed, say your prayers, because that's going to be huge. And that's what our generation wants. If Roe v. Wade were to be overturned, we can vote, take the battles to our state capitals, to our legislators, try to pass more pro-life laws state to state. So that's what we want to see. When you poll millennials and younger generations, that's what they want. They want a say in this, and the Supreme Court has our hands tied with Roe v. Wade right now. So we're praying for reversal of Roe.
All right, great. Well, I'm going to ask you a couple more questions. So first, tell me what year you are in college and then what you're studying.
Yeah, I'm a freshman and I'm studying psychology.
And I'm a junior and I'm studying biology education.
Now, I just have one last question for you guys. What would you say to your peers who might be a little bit nervous to join the pro-life movement, to be proactive, to be out there doing some activism, doing great work? What message do you have for them?
Yeah, so this is actually my first semester really getting involved in the pro-life movement, and it's definitely intimidating. It's not an easy conversation. It's not in your comfort zone to have, but it's important. And I just really would say that you only have a limited amount of time to do something important, and so spend your time doing it instead of other things that just don't make an impact. I mean, I've really seen Students for Life have an impact on other people's lives, so yeah.
Right, great. And Lori, do you have any last message for the students that are out there today and maybe our audience that's watching at home?
Stay warm, everyone out there. Keep praying. This is so much a spiritual battle as it is a culture battle. So please keep the prayers coming. Don't stop after today. Like I said, a decision will be made in June, end of June. Usually the last weekend of June is when they decide controversial cases. So please keep the prayers coming and keep all of us in your thoughts and prayers.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Let's get back to the show.
Howdy. I mean, we're always proud to be Texans, but now that we have the most restrictive abortion law in the country, we are really proud to be Texans. So, for 8 years of my life, I worked at Planned Parenthood. As the director of that facility, I would happily educate women on the ease of abortion, glossing over any details of the procedure or any possible risk. I would walk them up and down the halls, escorting them in and out of the rooms as they waited for their turn to lay on a table that was still warm from the woman who had just taken their turn before them. After all, our goal was to have a woman on the table, off the table, abortion complete in 5 minutes. Time is money in the abortion industry, and we had a certain quota or number of abortions that we had to sell each month. The waiting room of an abortion facility is loud, like them, full of women and the people who they brought with them to their appointments, sometimes with their other children in tow. People are having lively conversations, often discussing their past abortions and giving encouragement to the other first-timers in the room. But every once in a while, I would be called to work in the loneliest room in our facility. It's often the loneliest room I often say it's the loneliest room I've ever walked into. It's the abortion clinic recovery room. A room lined with recliners, and low lighting, silent except for the quiet sobs of women, and they all cry. They all cry. We didn't give them much time to dry their tears and steal their emotions. 20 minutes was all they were allowed. 20 minutes to convince themselves that the feelings they were experiencing were a lie, to convince themselves that abortion was normal, that they were only crying because of their hormones. 20 minutes to convince themselves that no, it really wasn't a baby. And we, the abortion clinic staff, gave them no comfort, and we certainly never gave them a shoulder to cry on. We never talked to them about abortion regret, because if we did, then we would be admitting that women actually did regret their abortion, and we could not do that. We handed them a tissue, left them to cry alone, gave them 1 month's supply of birth control pills, a can of apple juice, some graham crackers, and sent them on their way. It was another woman that fulfilled our monthly abortion quota. That was just the process of how we dehumanized the women that came through our facility. But the primary victim of abortion was being dehumanized in a far more barbaric fashion. While we were processing women by the dozens, like a farmer would process livestock, their preborn human children were being suctioned through tubes or being torn apart by the rigid teeth on the end of sofa clamps. Outside the doors of our abortion procedure rooms, you could hear the suction machines loudly whirring. The doctor would know the abortion was complete when they heard a very loud suction noise. That was the head being sucked through the tube, the largest part of the baby. After the procedure was over, their body parts were being counted and accounted for on pieces of paper with the appropriate check boxes listed for arms, legs, head, and torso. The products of Conception Lab look like an assembly line of baby body parts. At some facilities, these parts are put into industrial strength garbage disposals and ground up. At our facility, they were put into red biohazard bags and then at the end of the day, put into a freezer that the staff jokingly called the nursery. This is abortion in the United States every day, approximately 2,500 times a day. This is what they are celebrating today. Abortion dehumanizes everyone it touches. It hurts women, men, families, and of course our most innocent, the preborn. Abortion also hurts those who work in the abortion industry. My organization, And Then There Were None, has helped over 600 abortion workers, including physicians, leave this industry. Women are wrecked inside these abortion clinic walls at the hands of an industry that cares only about their bottom dollar. None of this is about women's rights. This is about the right to harm every woman and child who walks through their doors. In 1973, we didn't know, but we know better now. And when you know better, you do better. When a product is deemed unsuitable or unsafe for the public, it is pulled from the market. Abortion is unsuitable for public consumption. Any product where its success is determined by the death of another human being, it should be pulled from the market. It is time for abortion to be recalled in this country. It is time to end abortion. And I just want to say on a personal note, because this is very personal to me, if you are a woman who has had an abortion in this crowd, I just want to say that I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you were lied to. I am sorry that people like me took advantage of you, that we coerced you, that we lied, that we didn't give you the information, that we abused you, because you know what? Abortion is abuse. It is abuse of women. And I am sorry that I was a part of that abuse in your life and the lives of so many other women. I am sorry that these women have been so deluded to believe that that abuse that took place in their lives is normal, because nothing about abortion is normal. That was not normal for them. It was not okay. And if that happened to you, I am so sorry. And I'm so sorry that I was a part of that industry. And you deserve healing. You deserve the very best. And if you haven't sought that healing, please do so today. Thank you.
Welcome back. We have Ann O'Connor from NIFLA here with us today, and thank you so much for joining us. Can we first just start off by having you explain a little bit more about NIFLA and how many pregnancy centers you work with across the nation, and just give us your mission?
Yes, NIFLA stands for the National Institute of Family and Life Advocates, and we were formed over 25 years ago to help pregnancy centers do things with excellence, legally and medically. We have over 1,600 centers that we represent. Most of them are medical facilities providing free ultrasounds, pregnancy testing, all kinds of services for free to women who are facing unplanned pregnancies.
Is there a particular story that comes to mind, any particular client or staff member that has a story that you'd like to highlight today?
Yes, we helped a center in Alabama become medical. They had been a pregnancy resource center for many years, but they found that they were not serving women who were really struggling with the abortion decision. So we helped them add ultrasound services. It took 9 months, which is interesting, it was like a pregnancy. And immediately when they were offering the medical services, they quadrupled the number of women they were seeing. And most of those women were considering abortion. So they were providing a service that these women really needed. And of the 29 women that they saw in one quarter who were thinking about abortion, all but one chose life. So it's such a powerful tool. Ultrasound gives a picture to the womb and helps the mother bond with her baby. It's just such rewarding work.
You are all so amazing, and thank you so much for the work that you do. Now, you wouldn't be able to do that work without the freedom to run your organization the way that you want to run your organization. So can you tell us a little bit about the Supreme Court case, NIFLA v. Becerra, that happened a few years ago?
Yes, this is like deja vu being here now, except it's sunny, and back then it was cold and rainy. But NIFLA versus Becerra was an amazing case. It came out of the state of California that passed a law trying to force our pregnancy centers to post a sign in their waiting rooms, which basically referred women to get a free abortion and gave them a phone number they could call. Well, right away, ADF helped us, took up the case and said, you can't compel pregnancy centers to advertise for something they morally disagree with. Totally violates their mission of being. So ADF represented us all the way up to the Supreme Court, which is a miracle that we even got here. And it's deja vu because the Supreme Court ruled in our favor, and it was justice. And that's what we're hoping for today, is justice finally in this area of crazy abortion law.
Getting involved in litigation takes a lot of time and resources. It's very taxing, especially when you take it all the way up to the Supreme Court. What is your motivation? What was your motivation behind all of that?
Well, we're called to this mission of helping women and their families in unplanned pregnancies, in protecting unborn lives. So when you're called to something so high as that, you fight the fight. The battle is there no matter what. God has control of the results. And with a team like ADF behind you, representing you, all the way up to the Supreme Court, and, they had a team of lawyers working on the oral arguments for months and months and months, and it was perfect. Tom, my boss, and I were sitting in the court listening to Mike Farris, who argued the case for us, and we were just leaning into each other because it was just, the arguments went so well, and the court agreed.
Wow. Well, I do have one last question for you. What message do you have for a woman that might be facing an unplanned pregnancy and just isn't sure what to do in that kind of situation?
Find a pregnancy center. For a woman who is finding themselves in an unplanned pregnancy, didn't expect it, doesn't know what to do, doesn't have a support system around her, come to a pregnancy center first. There you will find a space where you can just take a breath, figure out what's going to happen. And they will provide you all the resources that you need to make an informed decision. It's so important not to go into this blindly, but to make an informed decision because it's life-changing.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for your life-saving work, for all that you do, all you and your team members over at NIFLA. Thank you. We're going to take it over to Erin Hawley, a video of Erin Hawley, Senior Counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom.
On December 1st, the Supreme Court of the United States will hear arguments in what may be the most important case of our lifetimes. In Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, the Supreme Court has an opportunity to finally overturn Roe versus Wade and return the issue of abortion to the states. Roe is a patently unconstitutional decision that results in the death of over 2,360 children every single day. So let's break down the case and what it could mean for the future of unborn children in America. In 2018, Mississippi passed the Gestational Age Act. This is a common sense law that limits abortion after 15 weeks and protects the lives of babies in the womb, babies that can kick, move, sense movement, likely feel pain, and even hiccup. The law also protects the other victims of abortion, the women who leave bearing physical and emotional scars, and also the medical professionals who perform the gruesome procedures. After an abortion provider challenged Mississippi's law and the case made its way through the court system, the Supreme Court agreed to hear it. The question the justices will be considering cuts to the very heart of Roe versus Wade. Are all prohibitions on elective abortions before a baby is viable outside the womb, around 22 weeks gestational age, are all of these prohibitions unconstitutional? Right now, Supreme Court precedent, starting with Roe versus Wade, says yes. But Mississippi and a majority of Americans say no, an emphatic no. In the decades since Roe, we've learned a lot about human life and its beginnings. Roe is outdated. It's based on terrible legal reasoning and bad science. All human life, born and unborn, is valuable and deserves protection. The Supreme Court should fix its mistake and overturn Roe. The U.S. Constitution says nothing about abortion, but properly interpreted, it does allow states to protect the most vulnerable among us. And American founding principles, as seen in the Declaration of Independence, say a lot about the right to life. Please pray for the justices as they consider this historic case that will affect generations to come.
My name is Brooke Paz. I'm the Government Affairs Coordinator for Students for Life Action, and I'm here to help reserve the space for tomorrow for Dobbs arguments. So we have to hold this space to make sure that no one messes with our stuff, to make sure that we are prepared to utilize this space in the morning. On the other side, now the courthouse is blocked off in 2 blocks of the pro-abortion people and the pro-life people, and so we're just making sure that everything is good to go for tomorrow. We don't want to spook Capitol Police, so we got to make sure someone's here to represent our stuff and say that all of this is kosher, all of this is good, to make sure everything they need is here and the space is reserved so that they're ready to go for the events tomorrow. Myself and my colleague Liz got here really early today, earlier in the afternoon, and we started setting up snacks and drinks and sandwiches. We have out here chairs and blankets and hand warmers, huge boxes of them from Costco, and toe warmers. I have sleep blocks from 10 to about 1. I have to be out here 1 to 3 and then 4 to 5. So it's going to be a very chilly and long night.
My name's Mary Grace Calthorpe. I go to school at Mount St. Mary's University in Maryland. I'm Joseph Carlson. I'm from Mount St. Mary's University.
Leggings, sweatpants, gloves, the warmest coat I own, long sleeves, scarf, whatever this is called, headband thing, wool socks, sneakers, so yeah, layered up.
Little Hotties hand warmers. This is not an advertisement, I promise. I think they work. This one's still warming up. So.
All right. They have space heaters for us and hot hands and things like that. So that and focusing on our homework to not think about the cold.
The Supreme Court has given a ruling before, and it wasn't very good. Most people acknowledge that, at least from a legal standard, it wasn't a very good law. And so this is a really important opportunity to turn that around.
The pro-life movement, just like any good movement in American history, stands up for those who have not been protected by laws in this country. The preborn are just as human as people walking among us, and the pro-life movement is just trying to draw attention to their humanity, to give them the same human rights that every human should be afforded, and in doing that, continue to support women.
I'm Lily, I'm from California.
I'm Miles, I'm from Washington State. I'm Noah, I'm from Virginia.
And I'm Freeman, I'm from Montana.
And why is it important for you to be out here tonight?
Because we are going to be the post-war generation, and we know that in 50 years when our grandchildren ask us what we did to defend the preborn, we will know we were here.
We just feel like this is a historical night. I mean, it's going to be a historical week. We're here because, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we wouldn't miss it for the world. We're so excited to be here.
Yeah, how about you?
Well, we know that abortion hurts women, and we want to get rid of Roe v. Wade because Roe v. Wade, promotes abortion, and we want to get rid of that because abortion hurts women.
Do you guys think abortion laws in America are extreme?
Absolutely. I think that Roe v. Wade was essentially written, they found in the Constitution in invisible ink. It's something that we shouldn't really support as a society because it absolutely is detrimental to what we think of as life and what we think of as humanity. And so I think that any form of abortion is extreme.
This is a huge monumental case, as everyone's been saying. This is what we pro-lifers have been working towards, an opportunity to overturn Roe v. Wade. So it's amazing to be part of history. This is kind of the behind-the-scenes stuff that people don't think about that you have to do in order to have a presence at these things. But it's going to be worthwhile, and it's going to be great to look back on this and tell our children and our grandchildren that we were here in this monumental, life-changing time.
I got a scarf. I got a whole look. Yeah.
Yeah, we got the boots, we got the wool.
Yeah.
Yep.
We got the hand warmers.
Oh yes, this
I've got a fuzzy hoodie under this.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh wait, should we put on our hat?
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
There you go.
Look.
There you go.
It's cool to be pro-life.
Oh yeah, it is. Oh yeah.
Our next speaker is Catherine Beck Johnson, another lawyer for Family Research Council. She's a mom, a lawyer, amazing. Please welcome Catherine.
My name is Catherine Beck Johnson, and I'm a mother and an attorney. I'm honored to stand here today on the steps of our nation's highest court, whose promise etched in marble above our heads reads equal justice under the law. At its best, the citadel of our republic has inspired its citizens by standing up to prejudice, power, and politics to provide equal justice to the most vulnerable members of our society, as it did in ending legal segregation in Brown versus Board of Education. At its worst, this court has abandoned its commitment to equal justice and manipulated the Constitution to deny rights to marginalized groups like slaves in the Dred Scott decision and unborn children in Roe versus Wade. Dred Scott has rightly been consigned to the dustbin of history, but this court has repeatedly upheld the central premise of Roe versus Wade that a woman has the right to terminate the life of her innocent child. Most famously in Planned Parenthood versus Casey, decided just weeks before I was born. Now, for the first time since Casey, there's hope that history will once again be made in this building and that the court will recommit itself to providing equal justice to all human persons, no matter how powerless or small. As Attorney General Fitch explained in Mississippi's brief before this court, the case for Roe is built on lies. Lies told to women that access to abortion is necessary to achieve their dreams in life. I didn't have to have an abortion to achieve my dreams in life. I did it, and no woman has to. Mississippi is boldly leading the greatest civil rights case of our time. The case that will end the lie that women must kill their children to succeed in life. The Supreme Court must restore the most fundamental right there is, the right to life, the very right to exist. No other right in our nation is safe if the right to life is not secured. While the Supreme Court can't bring back the millions and millions of lives lost to abortion in the past almost 50 years, it can begin to undo the damage done by Roe and Casey by ending the so-called right to an abortion. Unborn children should have full legal protection, and it's past time we protect children in the womb. Women are not empowered by taking away the rights of our children. The pro-aborts claim that my daughter must be able to kill her child to succeed in life. They claim the child in my womb has no legal right to exist. We reject these lies. We know that my daughter and little girls everywhere not only deserve the right to exist, but the right to dream of their families and their careers. They know the child in my womb, though small, is a unique person who deserves to live. We fight for these children, the littlest and most vulnerable ones in our society. We call on the Supreme Court to finally recognize Mississippi and every other state's right and duty to protect the unborn.
Great job. Great job, Catherine.
Thanks for joining us. We have David B. Wright here. He's the founder of 40 Days for Life, and he is currently doing some consulting and advising, and he's very motivating to the pro-life movement. David, thank you so much for being here
Oh,
today.
my goodness, Bernadette, thank you so much for having me. What a glorious day. Do you think maybe God's trying to give us a sign that a new day is dawning for life?
I think he is, absolutely.
It's a joy to be
Yes.
with you.
Thank you so much, David. First, I want to start off with how you got involved in the pro-life movement.
I got involved in the pro-life movement because abortion came to my town. And I was living in the town of College Station, Texas. I was working happily in the pharmaceutical industry, and Planned Parenthood announced that they were going to open the first ever abortion facility in our community. And our community was in an uproar, and a local church secretary, a 21-year-old woman named Lauren, organized a meeting at a local church. More than 400 people from dozens of churches came throughout the community, and I was there. My wife dragged me there, kicking and screaming. But that night I really felt convicted that I have a role in helping to solve this crisis. If children are going to die in my town, if women are going to be wounded in my town, then I need to do something about it. And so I began to volunteer with the local group. A few years later, I felt the call to quit my job in the pharmaceutical industry, to lead that local group. And it was at that local group that we started 40 Days for Life. And so for the last 20 years, I've been involved full-time in the pro-life movement, and it has been a crazy ride. But it all started because a crisis came that broke my heart. And I said, we've got to find hope in the midst of this heartbreak.
Now, what was the motivating factor that kept you so interested and so involved in the pro-life movement?
Really, it was the lives that I saw that were being saved. So when you meet a child who's been spared from abortion because of some effort that you're a part of, it's life-changing, and you'll never regret anything you've done. But it's also the women, and meeting women who have been spared that lifetime of regret, who didn't have an abortion, and who are thankful that they made the decision for life. That was very reaffirming. But also as I began to hear the stories of women who had been harmed by abortion, and I realized that abortion is not helping women. What happened at the U.S. Supreme Court back in 1973 was promised to empower women, and instead it's hurt and harmed and killed women. And as I heard those stories, as I met the children who some of their peers were victims of abortion, I realized it's for these women, it's for these children, and it's also because it's a calling from God. I think as people of faith and conscience, we recognize that God has called us to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, or to rescue those being led to the slaughter. There is no issue more pertinent right now to those verses than this issue of life. And so all of us need to find our role, find our place, and get involved for such a time as this.
Absolutely. And we do see a lot of young women that are involved in the pro-life movement, but we are seeing more and more young men step up to the plate. Why is it so important for men to be involved in the pro-life movement?
Yeah, I've always been amused that the abortion industry says, oh, you men, keep out of this. You don't have a womb. You don't have a uterus. You can't even have a say on this. And yet the 7 men who imposed abortion on America at the Supreme Court, it was men who passed the Roe v. Wade decision, the Doe v. Bolton decision. I also am amused when the vast majority of abortionists are themselves men. Every child that was ever conceived had both a mother and a father, and half the children who are being aborted are male. So we recognize this is an injustice that affects men just as much as it does women. But also we realize that every time a woman is facing an unexpected pregnancy, the man who got her into that situation needs to be a man and step up and be a protector and a provider. And for those of us who may not have led to that scenario, we as men are called to stand up, to speak up, to be a voice for those who have no voice. So really, I'm greatly encouraged. And Martin Luther King Jr. said, an injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. As long as any member of our human family, girl or boy, is being aborted, as long as women are being wounded by abortion, we as men and women have an obligation to stand up, to speak up, and do everything we can to end this injustice for once and for all.
Absolutely, and we have the chance to do that just this year. We're here because Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization is being heard today. Why is this case so important to you and to the pro-life movement?
Yeah, this case represents something that we haven't had an opportunity for in a long time. So since the Roe versus Wade, Doe versus Bolton decisions in '73, the Planned Parenthood v. Casey decision in 1992, this is the first time since '92 the court has had the opportunity to really look and say, did we make the right decision in Roe versus Wade and these other cases that followed? And if not, they have a chance to correct it. So the Mississippi case is simply a vehicle. It's not just about abortions after 15 weeks or before 15 weeks of pregnancy, because the Mississippi Attorney General has even asked the Supreme Court overturn Roe versus Wade. You now have enough data, enough history to realize this destroys children. We didn't recognize their humanity in the womb in '73. It hurts women. We've seen the stories of thousands upon thousands of women who've been harmed by abortion. You have an opportunity to correct the mistake that the past court made. So it's an opportunity to directly confront Roe versus Wade, possibly strip away major tenets of it, and by the grace of God, it could possibly overturn Roe versus Wade. I'm not a lawyer, but what I think it really does is it illustrates to us hope like we've not had in a long time, and to recognize also that when abortion is overturned by the Supreme Court, maybe it's through this case, maybe it's not, but we have to understand all that does, it throws the decision back to the states. And so what we do locally, what we do in our states is more important now than ever, and this has brought it to the forefront. Abortion's in the national conversation. You see states like Mississippi or Texas through the Heartbeat Act who are taking this initiative because the federal government has failed children and failed women. So we have to recognize that what each of us do, what every viewer does in their community makes a difference more now than ever. So get involved in efforts like 40 Days for Life. Pray like you've never prayed. Fast if you feel led to fast. Help the Sidewalk Council. Get involved with Students for Life or pro-life groups. Whatever you can do, find your place. Advocate on behalf of women and children, and you can be a part of changing the course of history.
That is absolutely motivating. Thank you so much, David. Now, is there any last message that you might have for our audience? Maybe somebody who isn't quite as motivated to get involved in the pro-life movement, who might be nervous about getting involved in the pro-life movement. Any message for them?
My message is that they can make a difference. Each and every one of us have unique skills, gifts, talents that God has given us, experiences that we've had, and each of us, if we ask God, show me where I can make a difference, show me what I can do, He will show you. And when He does, He'll give you the grace, He'll give you the strength to be able to do the role that you are called to do. One day when the history books mark how abortion ended, your grandchildren are going to be reading those stories, and they're going to say, was my parent, was my grandparent, were they involved? And we've got an opportunity today to decide, will we be writing those stories that our grandchildren will read about how abortion ended, by each of us answering the call that God has given us, being faithful to that, and recognizing that we have an opportunity not only to change history, but to build God's kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. Each of us has a role. Each of us can make a difference.
Wow. Well, I am so motivated to be involved in the pro-life movement right now. I don't know how our audience couldn't be after that. Thank you so much, David. Thank you for being here today. Let's get back to the show.
I'm Penny Nance. I'm the president of Concerned Women for America, the nation's largest public policy women's organization, and we're pro-life. I'm joined today from women around the country, from Texas, 20 hours in a bus from Houston, Texas, because they believed so deeply in being here. Women from North Dakota, from California, from New Mexico, from around the nation. And we have about 1,100 students here today, a bunch from Liberty University. Let me hear ya. And joined with me is their president, Dr. Jerry Prevost. Thank you for being here. Now, I want to make sure that everybody here lets their voices be heard. So we're going to say the word life, and we're going to say it 10 times. And we want to let them hear it on the inside. You ready? Let's go. I'm going to get up way up here. Let me hear you say it. Life, 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 life. Thank you. You know, the state of abortion is on this nation. And I just want to get real for just a minute. This is deep and it is serious. We have with us women that are leaders at Concern Women for America, leaders in the pro-life movement, who are so deeply wounded by abortion. We understand why we're here. We are here to stand for the least of these and stand for their mothers who are so broken. We as a nation want to come around them and give them better alternatives. Hats off to Texas that just appropriated $100 million for alternatives to abortion. Hats off to over 3,000 pregnancy care centers around the country through private dollars who care for women. Hats off to the volunteers who love women and take them into our home. And I want to stand here and say, it is a lie out of the pit of hell that pits the dreams and the hopes of women against the very life of their unborn child. It's a lie, and we stand today against it. So, for all the people that say that we need abortion for equality, women are equal. For all the lies, the people who say women need abortion for freedom, we were born free. It is a lie to say that our hopes and our dreams and aspirations would be dashed if we have a baby. Our hopes and dreams will be realized by hard work, by the grace of God, by sacrifice and by love of our neighbors and community. And as a church, we will step by and link arms and love you. Choose life. This is our moment. This is why we've marched all these years. It's why we prayed, we've advocated, we walked the halls of Congress. We walked in our state legislatures. This is our moments to stand for the least of these and to make sure that those 9 justices on the inside understand that women want life. 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 I love it that one of the other speakers ended in a prayer. So if you'll just 1 minute join me. And in a little nod to Sister Amy on the inside, who was pummeled in the New York Times because her church lifts their hands when they pray, I'm going to do the same. You might want to join me. Dear Heavenly Father, we pray for Lynn Fitch on the inside, arguing for life. Father, we stand before you and we pray for the Holy Spirit to be present, for truth to reign supreme inside the Supreme Court. And we stand at this minute, called before you, called to account as a nation, asking you to forgive us for the lives of 62 million babies who've been sacrificed on a false altar to false gods. And we ask your forgiveness. You ask you, God, to anoint the church to stand for and to care for these babies and these mothers. Help us love and love each other and love our enemies and to care for the least of these. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. Great job, Hetty. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Father William Gurney, pastor of St. Joseph's on Capitol Hill, and it's an honor to be with you here today to pray with you. O God, source of all life and goodness, you fashion human lives in your own image and likeness. and through your love, give each human life dignity, sanctity, and priceless worth. Awaken in every heart new reverence for the least of your children, and renew among your people a readiness to nurture and sustain your precious gift of human life. Grant the members of the Supreme Court the wisdom to uphold natural law and the courage to correctly interpret constitutional law. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, God forever and ever. Amen.
Welcome back. We are just learning that the oral argument for Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization is starting now. So we're going to cut to that so you can listen live.
Consider this case. The Mississippi law here prohibits abortions after 15 weeks. The law includes robust exceptions for a woman's life and health. It leaves months to obtain an abortion. Yet the courts below struck the law down. It didn't matter that the law applies when an unborn child is undeniably human, when risks to women surge, and when the common abortion procedure is brutal. The lower courts held that because the law prohibits abortions before viability, it is unconstitutional no matter what. Roe and Casey's core holding, according to those courts, is that the people can protect an unborn girl's life when she just barely can survive outside the womb, but not any earlier when she needs a little more help. That is the world under Roe and Casey. That is not the world the Constitution promises. The Constitution places its trust in the people. On hard issue after hard issue, the people make this country work. Abortion is a hard issue. It demands the best from all of us, not a judgment by just a few of us. When an issue affects everyone, and when the Constitution does not take sides on it, it belongs to the people. Roe and Casey have failed, but the people, if given the chance, will succeed. This court should overrule Roe and Casey and uphold the state's law. I welcome the court's questions.
General Stewart, you focus on the right to abortion, but our jurisprudence seems to focus on, in Casey, autonomy, in Roe, privacy. Does it make a difference that we focus on privacy or autonomy, or more specifically on abortion?
I think whichever one of those you're focusing on, Your Honor, particularly if you're focusing on the right to abortion, each of those starts to become a step removed for what's provided in the Constitution. Yes, the Constitution does provide, protect certain aspects of privacy, of autonomy, and the like. But as this court said in Glucksburg, going directly from general concepts of autonomy, of privacy, of bodily integrity, to a right is not how this court traditionally does due process analysis. So I think it just confirms, whichever one of those you look at, Your Honor, a right to abortion is not grounded in the text, and it's grounded on abstract concepts that this court has rejected in other contexts as supplying a substantive right.
You say that this is the only constitutional right that involves the taking of a life. What difference does that make in your analysis?
Sure, Your Honor. I think it makes a number of differences. One, I'd mention two in particular. One is it really does mark out the unbelievably profound ramifications of this area, which in many other areas, assisted suicide, a whole host of important areas that are important to dignity, autonomy, freedom, and important to matters of conscience. It marks it out as one of the unique areas where this court has taken that important issue to the people, and it's something that implicates life, and it just, I think, marks off, Justice Thomas, how problematic and unusual and how much of a break the court's abortion jurisprudence is from those other cases.
If we don't overrule Casey or Roe, do you have a standard that you propose other than the viability standard?
It would be, Your Honor, a clarified version of the undue burden standard. I would emphasize, I think, as Your Honor is alluding to, that no standard other than the rational basis review that applies to all laws will promote an administrable, workable, practicable, consistent jurisprudence that puts matters back with the people. I think anything heightened here is going to be problematic, but I would say if the court were not inclined to overrule Casey, the choice would be undue burden standard, untethered from any bright line viability rule.
Thank you.
I'd like to go to a different topic, back to Casey.
Yes,
I assume you've read Casey pretty thoroughly.
Yes, Your Honor.
And there are two parts. One is they reaffirm Roe. Put that to the side. The second is an opinion for the court, not for three people, but for the court. And that second part is about what stare decisis principles should be used to overrule a case like Roe. And they say Roe's special. What's special about it? They say it's rare. They call it a watershed. Why? Because the country is divided, because feelings run high, and yet the country, for better or for worse, decided to resolve their differences by this court laying down a constitutional principle, in this case, women's choice. That's what makes it rare. That's not what I'm asking you about. I want your reaction to what they said follows from that. What the court said follows from that is that it should be more unwilling to overrule a prior case. Far more unwilling we should be, whether that case is right or wrong, than the ordinary case. And why? Well, they have a lot of words there, but I'll give you about 10 or 20. There will be inevitable efforts to overturn it. Of course there will. Feelings run high. And it is particularly important to show what we do in overturning a case is grounded in principle and not social pressure, not political pressure. Only, quote, the most convincing justification can show that a later decision overruling, if that's what we did, was anything but a surrender to political pressures or new members. And that is an unjustified repudiation of principles on which the court stakes its authority. And then there are two sentences I'd like to read, because they say they really mean this, the court, not just three. To overrule under fire in the absence of the most compelling reason to re-examine a watershed decision would subvert the court's legitimacy beyond any serious question. And the last sentence, after they quote Potter Stewart on the same point, they say overruling unnecessarily and under pressure would lead to condemnation, the court's loss of confidence in the judiciary, the ability of the court to exercise the judicial power and to function as the Supreme Court of a nation dedicated to the rule of law. Now, that's the opinion of the court. All right? And it's about stare decisis and how we approach it. And I hope everybody reads this. It's at 505 U.S. 854 to 869. All right. What do you say to that?
Sure, Justice Breyer. I would say a couple things. I would say we have very closely gone through the factors that the Casey court itself went through in stare decisis. More than half of our brief is devoted to stare decisis. We now have 30 years in the wake of Casey to see what Casey has done and what it hasn't done.
No, it's called some bad things in the eyes of some people and some good things in the eyes of some people.
Your Honor.
All right, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. What I'd emphasize, Your Honor, is that to the extent that I would not say it was the people that called this court to end the controversy. The people, many people vocally really just wanted to have the matter returned to them so that they could decide it locally, deal with it the way they thought best, and at least have a fighting chance to have their view prevail, which was not given to them under Roe and then as a result under Casey. And I'd also emphasize, Your Honor, that on stare decisis, just as I said, the last 30 years, workability, developments in the law, factual developments that states can't account for, the workability, the undue burden standard alone, many problems. On all the metrics that Casey was describing, or the vast bulk of them, Casey fails. And I'd also emphasize this as well, Justice Breyer, that Casey was not a great example of simply letting precedent stand. It recast Roe's reasoning. It overruled two of the court's most important abortion decisions. It jettisoned the trimester framework of Roe itself and adopted a new standard unknown to other parts of the law. Those are not the hallmarks of precedent, and they failed under this court's stare decisis.
Okay, can I take it that your answer is, yes, you accept the way, the special rule, the rule for the rare watershed, the stare decisis principles for deciding whether to overturn such a case as Roe. You accept that, and you think it's met.
I would say yes, in part, Justice Breyer. And here's what I'd emphasize: is that I do think, particularly when Casey looked outward and looked to what it saw as pressure, there were pressure on all sides. As Your Honor noted, this is a hot, difficult issue for everyone. That's why it belongs to the people. And I think the conclusion the court drew from that it couldn't provide a good enough example, that it would look unprincipled, those conclusions were, with respect, Justice Breyer, mistaken. And the last 30 years has not seen any calming of that. It's been very different than some of the court's other controversial decisions that have seen much more calm.
What hasn't been at issue in the last 30 years is the line that Casey drew of viability. There has been some difference of opinion with respect to undue burden, but the right of a woman to choose, the right to control her own body, has been clearly set for since Casey and never challenged. You want us to reject that line of viability and adopt something different. 15 justices over 50 years have, or I should say 30 since Casey, have reaffirmed that basic viability line. 4 have said no, 2 of them members of this court, but 15 justices have said yes, of varying political backgrounds. Now, the sponsors of this bill, the House bill in Mississippi, said we're doing it because we have new justices. The newest ban that Mississippi has put in place, the 6-week ban, the Senate sponsor said we're doing it because we have new justices on the Supreme Court. Will this institution survive the stench that this creates in the public perception that the Constitution and its reading are just political acts? I don't see how it is possible. It's what Casey talked about when it talked about watershed decisions. Some of them, Brown versus Board of Education, it mentioned, and this one, have such an entrenched set of expectations in our society. That this is what the court decided, this is what we will follow. That we won't be able to survive if people believe that everything, including New York versus Sullivan, I could name any other set of rights, including the Second Amendment, by the way. There are many political people who believe the court erred in seeing this as a personal right as opposed to a militia right. If people actually believe that it's all political, how will we survive? How will the court survive?
Justice Sotomayor, I think the concern about appearing political makes it absolutely imperative that the court reach a decision well-grounded in the Constitution, in text, structure, history, and tradition, and that carefully goes through the stare decisis factors we've laid out. No, it didn't.
Casey went through every one of them. You think it did it wrong. That's your belief. But Casey did that. And you haven't added much to the discussion in your papers as to the errors that Casey made, other than I disagree with them, Casey.
Justice Sotomayor, maybe I can highlight 2. Casey gave one paragraph to the workability of Roe, It then adopted the undue burden standard, which is perhaps the most unworkable standard in American law. It gave about 3 paragraphs, if memory serves, to reliance, which doesn't account for the last 30 years and the changes that have occurred since Casey. It gave a brief factual view to things that have changed since Roe. Those, of course, are not going to take account of the last 30 years of advancements in medicine, science, all of those things.
What are the advancements in medicine?
I think it's an advancement in knowledge and concern about such things as fetal pain, what we know the child is doing and looks like and is fully human from a very early...
In regular cases, courts decide whether science fits the Daubert standard. Obviously, under the Daubert standard, the minority of people, a gross minority of doctors, who believe fetal pain exists before 24, 25 weeks. It's a huge minority, and one not well founded in science at all. So I don't see how that really adds anything to the discussion. That a small fringe of doctors believe that pain could be experienced before a cortex is formed doesn't mean that there's been that much of a difference since Casey.
We pointed out as an example, Your Honor, of where Roe and Casey improperly preclude states from taking account for these things, and they should be able to be concerned about a fact of an unborn life being poked and then recoiling in the way one of us would recoil.
General, I know what it said about viability in Roe, but was viability an issue in the case? I know it wasn't briefed or argued.
It was not an issue certainly the way it is an issue here, Your Honor. I think it was to the extent that the court had to reaffirm Roe. The way to read that as something other than dicta would be to understand.
I'm sorry, I don't know what that said. Was it an issue in Roe?
Oh, in Roe?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. My understanding is no. I mean, the law there was didn't have a viability tag. That was inserted by.
In fact, if I remember correctly, and it's an unfortunate source, but it's there. In his papers, Justice Blackmun said that the viability line was dicta, and presumably he had some insight on the question.
I think, and I'd add, Your Honor, Justice Blackmun, and I think as well his papers pointed out the arbitrary nature of it and the line drawing problems in there too.
And then in Casey said that was the core principle or the central principle in Roe, viability. It said that after tossing out the trimester formula, which many people thought was the core principle. But was viability at issue in Casey?
I don't think it was squarely at issue, Your Honor. Again, it's a little hard not to take the court at its word when it emphasized that viability is the central part of Roe's holding and saying that it is reaffirming that. So we kind of take that as it stands, but the court has not. It did not face a law like this, certainly, Mr. Chief Justice.
May I finish my inquiry?
Of course, Justice Sotomayor.
Virtually every state defines a brain death as death. Yet the literature is filled with episodes of people who are completely and utterly brain dead responding to stimuli. There's about 40% of dead people who, if you touch their feet, the foot will recoil. There are spontaneous acts by dead brain people. So I don't think that a response to by a fetus necessarily proves that there's a sensation of pain or that there's consciousness. So I go back to my question of what has changed in science to show that the viability line is not a real line, that a fetus cannot survive. And I think that's what both courts below said, that you had no experts say that there is any viability before 23 to 24 months.
And what I'd say is this, Justice Sotomayor, is that the fundamental problem with viability, it's not really something that rests on science so much. It's that viability is not tethered to anything in the Constitution, in history, or tradition. It's a quintessentially legislative line. A legislature could think that viability makes sense as a place to draw the line, but it's quite reasonable for a legislature to draw the line elsewhere.
There's so much that's not in the Constitution, including the fact that we have the last word. Marbury versus Madison. There is not anything in the Constitution that says that the Supreme Court, is the last word on what the Constitution means. It was totally novel at that time. And yet, what the court did was reason from the structure of the Constitution that that's what was intended. And here in Casey and in Roe, the court said there is inherent in our structure that there are certain personal decisions that belong to individuals and the states can't intrude on them. We've recognized them in terms of the religion parents will teach their children. We've recognized it in their ability to educate at home if they choose. They just have to educate them. We have recognized that sense of privacy in people's choices about whether to use contraception or not. We've recognized it in their right to choose who they're going to marry. I fear none of those things are written in the Constitution. They have all, like Marbury versus Madison, been discerned from the structure of the Constitution. Why do we now say that somehow Roe versus Roe and Casey are so unusual that they must be overturned?
Well, Justice Sotomayor, I would emphasize two things. When you're going beyond the Constitution, this court has looked closely to...
No, what I'm saying is they didn't go beyond the Constitution.
Your Honor, they did not deduce those from the structure of the Constitution. They pointed to the 14th Amendment and reasoned that privacy in Roe, autonomy and similar values in Casey led to a right to abortion. That's not how this court traditionally does things, including in the vast run of cases that Your Honor ran through. The court looks to history and tradition, and here those decisively reject the proposition that states cannot legislate comprehensively on abortion before, after viability, and all throughout. So it's history and tradition, Your Honor. And I would also add, Your Honor, that those decisions, a great many of them draw, not just draw from text, history, and tradition, but they draw often clear lines, very workable, have not led to the many negative stare decisis factors that we identify here.
General, go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Barrett. Would a decision in your favor call any of the cases, that Justice Sotomayor is identifying into question?
No, Your Honor. I think for a couple reasons. First of all, I think the vast run of those cases, and some mentioned from time to time, I think Griswold, Lawrence, Obergefell, these are cases that draw clear rules. You can't ban contraception, can't ban intimate romantic relationships between consenting adults, can't ban marriage of people of the same sex. Clear rules that have engendered strong reliance interests and that have not produced negative consequences or all the many other negative stare decisis considerations we pointed out, Your Honor. Also, I'd add none of them involve the purposeful termination of a human life. So those two features, stare decisis and termination of a human life, Your Honor, puts all of those safely out of reach if the court overrules here.
Okay, so I'm sorry to interrupt again, but we really might be making progress. I mean, in the part that I read, of Casey,
yes, Your Honor.
I think they think go back 150 years, maybe now we could go back 200. They think there have only been two cases, which were what they call the watershed, and where these special tough overruling rules apply. You want this to be the third? Or do you think there were more? And if so, what were they?
Well, Your Honor, I think there's quite a bit of difference. I think the question is never, is it bad to overrule, period? Surely
I'm asking you to think in their terms. There were two they mentioned, you say. And they don't want Casey they don't want Roe to be the third. And now, in your opinion, you just answered Justice Barrett, or hey, all these are not rising to that level. Okay?
Right.
Are there any that do rise to the level, in your opinion?
I think, and I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with the watershed characterization, Your Honor. What I'd say, though, I can't think of another that kind of hits the radar, but I'd emphasize that a problem here is we're dealing with a right that doesn't have a basis in constitutional text, and again, very much in conflict with those values, Justice Breyer.
I'm not sure how your answer makes any sense. All of those other cases, Griswold, Lawrence, Obergefell, they all relied on substantive due process. You're saying there's no substantive due process in the Constitution, so they're just as wrong according to your theory.
No, Your Honor, we're quite comfortable with Washington versus Glucksberg and how it analyzes substantive due process, and it looks to text history. It looks to history and tradition to discipline the inquiry and make sure.
I mean, in Obergefell, there was no history of same-sex marriage.
And I think the court pointed out, look, when we were facing Loving versus Virginia.
I'm not trying to argue that we should overturn those cases. I just think you're dissimulating when you say that any ruling here wouldn't have an effect on those.
Respectfully, that's.
Do you think that no state is going to think otherwise? That no people in the population aren't going to challenge those cases in court?
I mean, Your Honor, we'll always have a diversity of views, but I think
that's the point.
I think that's one of the benefits of our society.
Isn't that the point?
That there's a diversity of views and people can vigorously debate and make decisions
exactly, and that's what we're still doing, and that's what we're doing under undue burden, but we haven't been doing it on the viability line.
And neither one has worked well. The viability line discounts and disregards state interests, and the undue burden standard has all of the problems that
How is your interest anything but a religious view? The issue of when life begins has been hotly debated by philosophers since the beginning of time. It's still debated in religions. So when you say this is the only right that takes away from the state the ability to protect the life, that's a religious view, isn't it? Because it assumes that a fetus is life at when? You're not drawing here. When do you suggest we begin that life?
Your Honor, aside from...
I'm putting it aside from religion.
I'll try to... I think there might be more than one question, and I'll do my very best, Justice Sotomayor. I think this court in Gonzalez pretty clearly recognized that before viability, we are talking with unborn life with a human organism. And I think the philosophical questions Your Honor mentioned, all those reasons that they're hard, they've been debated, they're important, those are all reasons to return this to the people, because the people should get to debate these hard issues. And this court does not in that kind of a circumstance.
So when does the life of a woman and putting her at risk enter the calculus? Meaning, right now, forcing women who are poor, and that's 75% of the population, and much higher percentage of those women in Mississippi who elect abortions before viability, they are put at a tremendously greater risk of medical complications and ending their life, 14 times greater to give birth to a child full term than it is to have an abortion before viability. And now the state is saying to these women, we can choose not only to physically complicate your existence, put you at medical risk, make you poorer by the choice, because we believe what? That
Sure, Your Honor. I think to answer, I think the question I think you led with, and then I think it expanded on, but is still on the same issue, is as to when does a woman's interest enter. As far as we're concerned, it's there the entire time. Our point is that all of the interests are there the entire time, and Roe and Casey improperly prevent states from taking account and weighing those interests however they think best. We're not saying...
General, are there secular philosophers and bioethicists who take the position that the rights of personhood begin at conception or at some point other than viability?
I believe so. I mean, I think that there's a wide array, of people of kind of all different views and of no faith views who would reasonably have that view, Your Honor. It's not tied to a religious view, and I don't think, were it otherwise, this court's jurisprudence on this issue would run right into some of its religious exercise jurisprudence.
General, Justice Breyer started with stare decisis, an important principle in any case. And here, for the reasons that Casey mentioned, especially so, to prevent people from thinking that this court is a political institution that will go back and forth depending on what part of the public yells loudest, and preventing people from thinking that the court will go back and forth depending on changes to the court's membership. And what strikes me about this case, and you come here very honestly, saying, you know, we want you to discard the entire setup, and then even if you don't do that, we want you to discard the viability line, which you've acknowledged again today, Casey says is the heart, the central principle of Roe. And so usually there has to be a justification, a strong justification in a case like this, beyond the fact that you think the case is wrong. And I guess what strikes me when I look at this case is that, you know, not much has changed since Roe and Casey. That people think it's right or wrong based on the things that they have always thought it was right and wrong for. So the rationale behind those cases has something to do with the autonomy and the freedom and the dignity of women to pursue their lives as they wish, to protect their bodily integrity, to make the decisions that are most fundamental to the course of their lives. And always in those cases, there was an understanding that there were important interests on the other side in protecting life or protecting the potential for life, whether people saw it one way or the other way, and that there was a difficult question here and a balance to be made. And I mean, it strikes me that some people think those decisions made the right balance and some people thought they made the wrong balance. But in the end, we are in the same exact place as we were then, except that we're not, because there's been 50 years of water under the bridge, 50 years of decisions saying that this is part of our law, that this is part of the fabric of women's existence in this country, and that places us in an entirely different situation than if you had come in 50 years ago and made the same arguments. So I guess I just wanted to hear you react to that.
Of course, Justice Kagan, thank you. I would emphasize a couple things, Your Honor. The fact that so much time has passed, let's say nothing had changed, that's not a point in Roe and Casey's favor. They have no basis in the Constitution. They adopt a right that purposefully leads to the termination of now millions of human lives. If nothing had changed, they'd be just as bad as they were 30 years ago, 50 years ago. And now we just have decades of damage, and we have a situation where nearly...
All right, we're going to take a quick break from oral arguments to speak with Aaron Getz of the March for Life today, and then we'll get right back to it. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Bernadette.
All right, well, first let's start off with your story. I understand that you were pro-choice before you became pro-life, so tell us what happened and why you became pro-life.
Yes, I was indeed pro-choice. I went to college, and I think before college I didn't really take a stance on abortion. It's not something I ever really thought about or gave any kind of concrete decision to what I felt about abortion. And so once I was at college, I went to a pretty progressive school that many of my peers were pro-abortion, and that's what I was surrounded by. And I really, waved the flag for a woman's right to her body. And at that time, didn't really consider that a baby is a totally different body, is a totally different human, unique, not the woman's body. And while I was in college, I was starting to have a conversion of faith. And as that happened, I just started to realize that my faith and what the gospel teaches me does not align with my views on abortion. And slowly but surely, not surrounded by anyone really who is pro-life, I had to do my own research. So I looked at SBA list, March for Life, live action, and really seeing live actions videos that depict what an abortion is, seeing their undercover work, David Daleidon's undercover work, they convicted me so much. I realized, oh my goodness, that is a human child in the womb, and the abortion industry wants to tell us otherwise. It's just a clump of cells, but that's a child. And so kind of over some time there, I came to the other side, and glory be to God for it.
Wow, well, thank you so much for sharing that. We're so excited to have you with us. Now, you ended up working at the March for Life. Can you give us a little bit of a background on the March for Life?
Absolutely. So the March for Life was founded a year after the Roe versus Wade decision was handed down almost 49 years ago. In January, 7 men handed down a very tragic decision, legalizing elective abortion all the way through 9 months of pregnancy. It's why we're here today in all 50 states. And since then, 62 million American children have been lost to the scourge of abortion, and countless mothers and fathers have been wounded as a result. And so our founder, Nellie Gray, on the anniversary of Roe, the first anniversary, she began the first ever March for Life. And since then, millions of pro-life Americans have showed up to Washington, D.C. every January on the anniversary to March for Life. And year after year, we see hundreds of thousands show up. It's a sea of people. It's so inspiring and so joyful. And Jeannie Mancini is now our proud leader and has taken over. And we're so, so excited for this year's March for Life.
And this year's March for Life is coming up just this next month. So can you give us some details on that? When it is, where it is, how people can get involved?
Absolutely. So our March for Life this year is happening on January 21st, 2022, right here on the National Mall behind us. The rally begins at 12 p.m. noon, and then we will walk from the National Mall all the way up to the Supreme Court. We're going to have some great speakers. I'm super excited. Father Mike Schmitz, Kirk Cameron, Tony McFadden. It's going to be such a beautiful day for life. And if you want to get involved, you can just go onto our website. We have a ton of information. You can RSVP, learn how to get all of your friends and family to come here, find a bus in your community to hop on if you don't have a ride. We have all of that information on our website, and it's super accessible to each and every person.
Perfect. Now, what is the theme of this year's March for Life?
The theme, which I'm super excited about, is equality begins in the womb. So the March for Life, we, come together, and our marchers know that each and every life in the womb has inherent dignity and is a human, right? And so here we are at the Supreme Court, and we are trying to prove that, yes, each and every life begins at conception and has equal rights. No matter your race, no matter your ability, no matter your gender, each and every one of us has equal rights beginning in the womb, and the abortion industry wants to convince us otherwise. They want to dehumanize the child, the unborn, and we're here to change that story, that narrative. And so, every year, hundreds of thousands of people show up here and prove that Roe versus Wade is not settled law. And so that's why we chose Equality Begins in the Womb, and I'm super, super excited about it.
Great. Well, I know I'm going to be there, so I hope to see all of you there. Thank you so much, Erin, for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's get back to oral arguments.
Indicated the court won't have to be looking at many other areas, because this is an area that has a uniquely problematic set of stare decisis considerations. A lot of other controversial areas, or once controversial areas, are quite settled, clear rules, and don't have those considerations against them. So really, by overruling Roe and Casey, the court won't have to go down that road, and a lot of those decisions are quite readily groundable in history, tradition, and the court's traditional factors, Your Honor.
Thank you. Justice Thomas? Justice Breyer? Justice Alito? Justice Sotomayor? Kane? Justice?
General, I just wanted to get your quick sense of how your intermediate positions would work. If basically the viability line was discarded and undue burden became the standard overall, a standard that, according to you, is an unclear one, what that would leave the court with going forward. I'm just sort of thinking about the great variety of regulations that states could pass. So whether one is 15 weeks and one is 12 weeks and one is 9 weeks, or variation across a wide variety of other dimensions, what would that look like coming to the court? How do you think we would be able to deal with that, or how would you counsel us to deal with that if the court were to go down that road?
Well, I think this is not to push back against the end, and I will answer your question, Justice Kagan, but part of why we've counseled to overrule full scale is that that's the only way to get rid of a number of the problems that I think Your Honor is alluding to. And that's that when you have the undue burden standard, it's a very hard standard to apply. It's not objective. The court looks to the record in each case and what's going on. I mean, the court in Casey itself said under this record, this is not an undue burden. You couldn't say necessarily for certain that a certain number of weeks one place would be an undue burden, but would be okay another place. But again, that is the world we have under Casey. So if the court upholds this law under the undue burden standard, it would be carrying forward those features, which and I hope I've answered your question, but I think that's one of the very strong reasons to just go all the way and overrule Roe and Casey, Your Honor. Anyway.
Justice Gorsuch? Justice Kavanaugh?
I want to be clear about what you're arguing and not arguing. Yes. And to be clear, you're not arguing that the court somehow has the authority to itself prohibit abortion, or that this court has the authority to order the states to prohibit abortion, as I understand it, correct?
Correct, Your Honor.
As I understand it, you're arguing that the Constitution's silent and therefore neutral on the question of abortion. In other words, that the Constitution's neither pro-life nor pro-choice on the question of abortion, but leaves the issue for the people of the states or perhaps Congress to resolve in the democratic process. Is that accurate?
Right. We're saying it's left to the people, Your Honor.
And so for if you were to prevail, the states, majority of states or states still could and presumably would continue to freely allow abortion. Many states, some states would be able to do that even if you prevail under your view. Is that correct?
That's consistent with our view, Your Honor. It's one that allows all interests to have full voice, and many of the abortions we see in certain states that I don't think anybody would think would be moving to change their laws in a more restrictive direction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Justice Barrett?
General, I have a question that is a little bit of a follow-up to one that Justice Breyer was asking you. That's about stare decisis, and I think a lot of the colloquy you've had with all of us has been about the benefits of stare decisis, which I don't think anyone disputes. And of course, no one can dispute, because it's part of our stare decisis doctrine, that it's not an inexorable command and that there are some circumstances in which overruling is possible. You know, we have Plessy, Brett Brown, we have Bowers versus Hardwick to Lawrence. But in thinking about stare decisis, which is obviously the core of this case, how should we be thinking about it? I mean, Justice Breyer pointed out that in Casey, and in some respects, well, it was a different conception of stare decisis insofar as it very explicitly took into account public reaction. Is that a factor that you accept? Or are you arguing that we should minimize that factor? And is there a different set of rules? It is true that Casey identified Brown and West Coast Hotel as watershed decisions, but is there a distinct set of stare decisis considerations applicable to what the court might decide as a watershed decision?
I don't think there should be a distinct set of considerations there, Your Honor. I think what I emphasize, and just to make sure, on the kind of legitimacy, the court looking outward, I think Casey was unusual in that regard. I think it was a mistake, and I think it's something that is kind of in conflict with this court's structure and approach as an independent branch, looking to the Constitution rather than looking without. And I think that's one reason why traditionally the court is in some of its greatest overrulings, it's not looking without. It's saying this was wrong. It was wrong the day it was decided. We know it's wrong today, and it's led to all these terrible consequences. We should get rid of it. So I think that was an unfortunate break, and I think the court, even if the court were to still look at legitimacy, though, Justice Barrett, I think the court could very, very powerfully say, look, our legitimacy really derives from our willingness to stand strong and stand firm in the face of whatever is going on, and stand for constitutional principle and follow our traditional stare decisis factors to overrule when it's appropriate. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice.
Ms. Rickleman?
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court.
Mississippi's ban on abortion 2 months before viability is flatly unconstitutional under decades of precedent. Mississippi asks the court to dismantle this precedent and allow states to force women to remain pregnant and give birth against their will. The court should refuse to do so for at least 3 reasons. First, stare decisis presents an especially high bar here. In Casey, this court carefully examined and rejected every possible reason for overruling Roe, holding that a woman's right to end a pregnancy before viability was a rule of law and a component of liberty it could not renounce. The question then is not whether Roe should be overturned, but whether Casey was egregiously wrong to adhere to Roe's central holding. Second, Casey and Roe were correct. For a state to take control of a woman's body and demand that she go through pregnancy and childbirth with all the physical risks and life-altering consequences that brings is a fundamental deprivation of her liberty. Preserving a woman's right to make this decision until viability protects her liberty while logically balancing the other interests at stake. Third, eliminating or reducing the right to abortion will propel women backwards. 2 generations have now relied on this right, and 1 out of every 4 women makes the decision to end a pregnancy. Mississippi's ban would particularly hurt women with a major health or life change during the course of a pregnancy, poor women who are twice as likely to be delayed in accessing care, and young people or those in contraception who take longer to recognize a pregnancy. To avoid profound damage to women's liberty, equality, and the rule of law, the court should affirm.
Counsel, I just have one question. I assume you, from your brief, you're relying on an autonomy theory.
Both bodily integrity and the ability to make decisions related to family, marriage, and childbearing, Your Honor.
Shortly, some years after we decided Casey, we had a case out of South Carolina, I believe, involved a woman who had been convicted of criminal child neglect because she ingested cocaine during pregnancy. In her case was post-viability, so it doesn't fit in the facts of this case. If she had ingested cocaine pre-viability and had the same negative consequences to her child, do you think the state had an interest in enforcing that law against her?
The state may have, Your Honor. The state can certainly regulate to serve its interests in fetal life and in women's health. Those particular laws tend to undermine both of those interests because they deter women from seeking prenatal care, which is counterproductive to both their health.
But the pre-viability as well as post-viability?
No, Your Honor. The court has been clear that after viability, states can prohibit abortion except to save a woman's life.
I mean in my example of criminal child neglect. I understand your argument is about abortion. I am trying to look at the issue of bodily autonomy and whether or not she has a right also to bodily autonomy in the case of ingesting an illegal substance and causing harm to a pre-viability fetus.
Your Honor, of course, those issues aren't posed in this case. And again, I would say that the states can certainly regulate throughout pregnancy, both before and after viability, to preserve fetal life and to preserve the woman's health. The court has said, however, there are other constitutional issues at stake. For instance, in the Ferguson case, that states still can't violate women's Fourth Amendment rights. But again, that's not what this case is about. This case is about a ban on abortion that the state concedes is weeks before viability. And the court has been clear for 50 years that the one thing that states cannot do is to take the decision completely away from the woman until viability. That until that point, it is her decision to make, given the unique physical demands of pregnancy and the life-altering consequences of pregnancy and having a child.
Thank you.
The point you made about the impact on women and their place in society, those were certainly made in Roe as well. What we have before us, though, is a 15-week standard. Are you suggesting that the difference between 15 weeks and viability are going to have the same sort of impacts as you were talking about, or as we were talking about in Roe?
Yes, Your Honor, I believe they would, because people who need abortion after 15 weeks are often in the most challenging circumstances. As I mentioned, they're people who have perhaps had a major health or life change, a family illness, a job loss, a separation, young people or people who are on contraception or pregnant for the first time and who are delayed in recognizing the signs of pregnancy, or poor women who often have much more trouble navigating access to care. And if they're denied the ability to make this decision because there's a ban after 15 weeks, they will suffer all of the consequences that the court has talked about in the past. And in fact, the data has been very clear over the last 50 years that abortion has been critical to women's equal participation in society. It's been critical to their health, to their lives, their ability to pursue.
I'm sorry, what kind of data is that?
I would refer the court to the brief of The Economist in this case, Your Honor, and it compiles data showing studies based actually on causal inference, showing that it's the legalization of abortion and not other changes that have had these benefits for women in society. And again, those benefits are clear for education, for the ability to pursue a profession, for the ability to have...
Putting that data aside, if you think that the issue is one of choice, that women should have a choice to terminate their pregnancy, that supposes that there is a point at which they've had the fair choice, opportunity to choice. And why would 15 weeks be an inappropriate line? So viability, it seems to me, doesn't have anything to do with choice. But if it really is an issue about choice, why is 15 weeks not enough time?
For a few reasons, Your Honor. First, the state has conceded that some women will not be able to obtain an abortion before 15 weeks, and this law will bar them from doing so. And a reasonable possibility standard would be completely unworkable for the courts. It would be both less principled and less workable than viability, and some of the reasons for that are, without viability, there will be no stopping point. States will rush to ban abortion at virtually any point in pregnancy. Mississippi itself has a 6-week ban that it's defending with very similar arguments as it's using to defend the 15-week ban, and there are states that have bans.
Well, I know, but I'd like to focus on the 15-week ban because that's not a dramatic departure from viability. It is the standard that the vast majority of other countries have. When you get to the viability standard, we share that standard with the People's Republic of China and North Korea. And I don't think you have to be in favor of looking to international law to set our constitutional standards to be concerned if those are share that particular time period.
I think there's two questions there, Your Honor, if I may. First, that is not correct about international law. In fact, the majority of countries that permit legal access to abortion allow access right up until viability, even if they have nominal lines earlier. So, for example, Canada, Great Britain, and most of Europe allows access to abortion right up until viability, and it also doesn't have the same barriers in place.
What do you mean, even if they have nominal lines earlier?
Some countries, Your Honor, have a nominal line of 12 weeks or 18 weeks, but they permit legal access to abortion after that point for broad social reasons, health reasons, socioeconomic reasons. So their regimes really aren't comparable, and they also don't have the same types of barriers that we have here. So if the court were to move the line substantially backwards, and 15 weeks is 9 weeks before viability, Your Honor, it's quite a bit backwards. It may need to reconsider the rules around regulations, because if it's cutting the time period to obtain an abortion roughly in half, then those barriers are going to be much more important.
Thank you.
Ms. Rickelman, I have a question about the safe haven laws. So petitioner points out that in all 50 states, you can terminate parental rights by relinquishing a child after abortion, and I think the shortest period might have been 48 hours, if I'm remembering the data correctly. So it seems to me, seen in that light, both Roe and Casey emphasized the burdens of parenting. And insofar as you and many of your amici focus on the ways in which the forced parenting, forced motherhood would hinder women's access to the workplace and to equal opportunities. It's also focused on the consequences of parenting and the obligations of motherhood that flow from pregnancy. Why don't the safe haven laws take care of that problem? It seems to me that it focuses the burden much more narrowly. There is, without question, an infringement on bodily autonomy, which we have in other contexts like vaccines. However, it doesn't seem to me to follow that pregnancy and then parenthood are all part of the same burden. And so it seems to me that the choice more focused would be between, say, the ability to get an abortion at 23 weeks or the state requiring the woman to go 15, 16 weeks more and then terminate parental rights at the conclusion. Why didn't you address the safe haven laws, and why don't they matter?
I think they don't matter for a couple of reasons, Your Honor. First, even if some of those laws are new since Casey, the idea that a woman could place a child up for adoption has, of course, been true since Roe. So it's a consideration that the court already had before it when it decided those cases and adhered to the viability line. But in addition, we don't just focus on the burdens of parenting, and neither did Roe and Casey. Instead, pregnancy itself is unique. It imposes unique physical demands and risk on women, and in fact has impact on all of their lives and their ability to care for other children, other family members, on their ability to work. And in particular, in Mississippi, those risks are alarmingly high. It's 75 times more dangerous to give birth in Mississippi than it is to have a pre-viability abortion, and those risks are disproportionately threatening the lives of women of color.
So are you saying, I mean, actually, as I read Roe and Casey, they don't talk very much about adoption. It's a passing reference that means out of the obligations of parenthood. But as I hear this answer, then are you saying that the right, as you conceive of it, is grounded primarily in the bearing of the child, in the carrying of pregnancy, and not so much looking forward into the consequences on professional opportunities and work life and economic burdens?
No, Your Honor, I believe it's both, and that is exactly how Casey talked about it. It talked about the two strands of cases that supported the right. One was the strand of cases supporting bodily integrity, and it cited to cases like Cruzan and Riggins versus Nevada. And the second was the strand of cases supporting decisional autonomy, and specifically decisions related to childbearing, marriage, and procreation decisions like Griswold, Loving. And so it's really both strands that we're relying on here.
May I ask you a question about stare decisis, counsel? Your colleagues on the other side have emphasized that Casey rejected Roe's trimester framework and replaced it with an undue burden standard. They argue that the undue burden standard was not well known to the law before that. And then they argue that the undue burden standard has evolved over time, too, in ways that the court has found difficult to agree upon. In Hellerstedt, for example, they point out in their briefs that the court seemed to suggest that a court should consider both the benefits and the burdens associated with the proposed restriction. In June Medical, more recently, the court splintered on that same question, whether benefits could be considered or only burdens. And so the argument goes that this has proved to be putting aside all the other obviously difficult questions in the case, that the standard itself has proved difficult to administer, and that is relevant to the stare decisis analysis. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to respond.
Yes, Your Honor. The first point I'd like to make is the undue burden test is not at issue in this case. That is the test that applies to regulations, not prohibitions, and the state has conceded that this is a prohibition. In fact, that's the title of this law, is an act to prohibit abortion after 15 weeks. And the only thing that's at issue in this case is the viability line, and the viability line has been enduringly workable. The lower federal courts have applied it consistently and uniformly for 50 years, and the Fifth Circuit here below had no difficulty striking down this law unanimously 3-0. So it's been an exceedingly workable standard. And if I may return to your question, Mr. Chief Justice, a reasonable possibility standard would not be workable. It would ultimately boil down to an argument that states can prohibit a category of women from exercising a constitutional right merely because of the number of people in the category, and that's just not how constitutional rights work. A state would never say that it could ban religious services on a Wednesday evening, for example, simply because most people could attend religious services on another night of the week.
So I actually just wanted to, that's helpful, I think. I just want to make sure I understand what you're telling me, counsel, that if the court were to, in this case, step past viability and apply undue burden, the undue burden test to regulations prior to viability, you would agree with the other side, I think, that that's not a workable standard. Is that a fair understanding of what you're telling the court?
No, Your Honor. I
believe, think that would be workable?
I believe that, if I may clarify, I believe the undue burden test has been workable for regulations that
I understand that. If it were to apply, if the court were to, and I thought this is what you were saying in response to the Chief Justice, but maybe I'm mistaken. Please correct me if I am, but what is your argument against applying the undue burden standard prior to viability?
If the undue burden standard, as this court laid out in Casey, which includes the viability line,
I'm asking, I know, we're fighting the hypothetical here, counsel, all right? Accept the hypothetical. Hypothetically, the court were to extend the undue burden standard to regulations prior to viability. Would that be workable, or would that not be workable in your view?
Without viability, it would not be workable, Your Honor, because it would ultimately, again, always come down to a claim that states can bar a certain category of people from exercising this right simply because of the number of people in the category. And that's not a workable standard, and it's not a constitutional.
I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, I read your brief to say that the only real options we have are to reaffirm Roe and Casey as they stand, or to overrule them in their entirety. You say that, quote, there are no half measures here. Is that a correct understanding of your brief?
Your Honor, it's certainly the arguments that the state has presented is what we're responding to there, which is that all of the state's arguments, including their alternatives, which are undue burden without viability, would be the equivalent of overruling Casey and Roe, because the viability line is the central holding of those cases. Casey mentioned it no fewer than 19 times, and the court in June Medical just a year ago affirmed that the viability line is the central holding of both Casey and Roe.
Well, you do emphasize that the court drew the line at viability in Roe and reaffirmed that in Casey, and that is certainly something that we have to take very seriously into consideration. But suppose we were considering that question now for the first time. I'm sure you know the arguments about the viability line as well as I do, probably better than I do. What would you say in defense of that line? What would you say to the argument that has been made many times by people who are pro-choice and pro-life that the line really doesn't make any sense, that it is, as Justice Blackmun himself described it, arbitrary? If a woman wants to be free of the burdens of pregnancy, that interest does not disappear the moment the viability line is crossed. Isn't that right?
No, Your Honor, and if I may make a few points to answer your question. First, I think the state views viability as arbitrary because it completely discounts the woman's interest. But viability...
But does a woman upon reaching the point of viability, does not the woman have the same interest that she had before viability in being free of this pregnancy that she no longer wants to continue?
Viability is a principled line, Your Honor, because in ordering the
I'm trying to see whether it is a principled line. Yes, you agree with me at least on that point, that a woman still has the same interest in terminating her pregnancy after the viability line has been crossed?
Yes, Your Honor, but the court balanced the interest, and in ordering the interest at stake.
Look at the interest on the other side. The fetus has an interest in having a life, and that doesn't change, does it, from the point before viability to the point after viability?
In some people's view, it doesn't, Your Honor, but what the court said is that those philosophical differences couldn't be resolved in a way...
That's what I'm getting at. What is the philosophical argument, the secular philosophical argument for saying this is the appropriate line? There are those who say that the rights of personhood should be considered to have taken hold at a point when the fetus acquires certain independent characteristics. But viability is dependent on medical technology and medical practice. It has changed. It may continue to change.
No, Your Honor, it is principled because in ordering the interest at stake, the court had to set a line between conception and birth, and it logically looked at the fetus's ability to survive separately as a legal line because it's objectively verifiable and doesn't require the court to resolve the philosophical issues at stake.
I just want to focus on stare decisis for a little bit. I found my colleague Justice Breyer's comments quite compelling. I'm not quite sure how they play out in Casey. It is certainly true that we cannot base our decisions on whether they're popular or not with the people. Casey seemed to say we shouldn't base our decisions not only on that, but whether they're going to seem popular. And it seemed to me to have a paradoxical conclusion that the more unpopular the decisions are, the firmer the court should be in not departing from prior precedent. It's sort of a super stare decisis. But it's super stare decisis for what are regarded as, by many, as the most erroneous decisions. Do you think there is that category, or is it just normal stare decisis?
I think it is precedent on precedent, Your Honor, because Casey did the stare decisis analysis for Roe. So the question before this court is whether that stare decisis analysis was egregiously wrong. And if I may answer your earlier question about whether viability was squarely at issue in Casey, it clearly was, Your Honor. At pages 869 to 871, the court squarely addressed viability because the government had made the argument that viability was arbitrary.
I appreciate that Casey addressed it, but that's different than saying it was at issue. It said it was the central principle of Roe because it was pretty much all that was left after they were done dealing with the rest of it. And the regulations in Casey had no applicability or not depending upon where viability was. They applied throughout the whole range, period. So if they didn't say anything about viability, it's like what Justice Blackmun said when discussing among his colleagues, which is a good reason not to have papers out that early, is that they don't have to address the line drawing at all in Roe. And they didn't have to address the line drawing at all they don't have to address the line drawing at all in Roe. And they didn't have to address the line drawing at all in Casey.
I disagree with that, Your Honor, because the undue burden test incorporates the viability line. That was what the court was assessing the regulations against, whether they imposed a substantial obstacle in the path of a woman before viability. And if a prohibition like this law isn't a substantial obstacle, then nothing would be. So the issue was squarely before the court, and in fact, the court said at page 879 that in adopting the undue burden test, it was not disturbing the viability line.
It's a very interesting question that I think Justice Barrett raised, too. It's usually just philosophical, but I think it has bite here. When I read Casey, it's not just one-on-one.
Hi, we were just listening to oral arguments for Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, and now we're going to cut back to the rally where Jeannie Mancini is about to speak from the March for Life.
I am blessed to be president of the March for Life, the organization that coordinates our world's largest annual peaceful human rights demonstration every single year. Thank you for all of you who've been involved in that. Nearly 49 years ago, on January 22nd, 1973, our country was forever changed when 7 men in this building behind us handed down Roe v. Wade, forever changing American history by imposing a radical expansion of abortion to all 50 states. Since that time, we've tragically lost over 62 million Americans to abortion, and many mothers and fathers regret having been involved in their abortion. When one life is taken through abortion, another is wounded. Many brave men and women have stood here to share their stories of regret having been involved in abortion every year at the end of the March for Life, and we thank them for this. In response to this tragic injustice, our organization, the March for Life, began 1 year after Roe in January 1974. Since that time, we've continued to march for life every year here in DC and now in the States. Collectively, millions of pro-life Americans have marched here in front of this court over the years. And we stand up for the poorest of the poor, the most vulnerable, the unborn child in its mother's womb. Much to the dismay of abortion activists, pro-life Americans have not become desensitized to abortion. In fact, just the opposite has occurred. The March for Life grows every single year. And folks, I can't think of a more tangible or hopeful sign that our justices see every single January that Roe and Casey are not settled law. Let me say that one more time. I can't think of a more tangible or hopeful sign that Roe and Doe are not settled law. The American people don't want it. We are united here today by our common understanding that every life from the moment of conception is precious and deserves legal representation. When it comes to the inherent dignity of the human person, skin color doesn't matter. Disability status doesn't matter. Socioeconomic background doesn't matter. Every life is precious, and an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that is why we march every single January. Being pro-life is pro-woman. We know that choosing life is not always easy, but it is empowering for women. At the March for Life, and all of us standing here today want to empower women with a message that they don't have to choose between the life of their baby and their future. I speak on behalf of millions of marchers calling for the Supreme Court to protect the inherent dignity of the human person and to empower women to choose life. Thank you.
Great job.
Think of the technological advancements that have taken place over the last 50 years. We've gone from massive computers with limited capabilities to pocket-sized smartphones with a world of information. We've moved from wired to wireless. We now have smart TVs that can stream thousands of options and cars that can basically drive themselves. These kinds of advancements in technology have greatly benefited medicine and healthcare. Today, we can understand human life like never before. Specifically, prenatal medicine in the last 50 years has transformed from using a fetoscope and blurry, ambiguous sonogram imaging to technology that allows for in utero surgery and accurate 4D renderings of fully formed preborn children. These developments have given us an incredible window into a mother's womb and the very first stages of every human life. Here's what we know. From the moment of fertilization, our DNA blueprint is created. Things like sex, eye color, hair color, and other traits are instantly determined. That means from this moment, a truly unique and separate life begins. After about 3 weeks, our heartbeat starts. A week later, our arms and legs begin to form. Around week 6, brain activity can be recorded. In the weeks that follow, our faces take shape, the beginnings of teeth form under the gums, and all our internal organs are in place and start to work together. By 15 weeks, we are about the size of a pear or an apple. Our ears and eyes are positioned properly. We have eyelids, eyebrows, eyelashes, nails, hair, and little fingers and toes. We can move freely, touch our face, sigh, and grasp objects. By now, we've already begun to suck our thumbs, hiccup, and stretch out in our mother's womb. Modern medical technology has truly revealed our humanity from the very beginning of our existence. We're vulnerable, but there's no question of what we are, human and living. It's undeniable. Medical professionals like me are among the first to encounter life at these early stages. Laws and policy that treat this precious life with the dignity it deserves ensure that I can honor my oath as a physician to do no harm. Every life is a miracle. Every life is unique. And every life at every stage deserves protection.
Thanks so much for watching. Up next, we're going to take it back to the rally, where our own General Counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom, Kristen Wagoner, is about to speak.
Good morning. What a great day. I'm Kristen Wagner. I'm a constitutional lawyer and I'm a mom, and I work for Alliance Defending Freedom, the largest legal organization that's committed to protecting life, parental rights, religious freedom, and free speech. Nearly 50 years ago, the United States Supreme Court imposed legal abortion on demand nationwide, and that decision, Roe versus Wade, is undemocratic, it's unconstitutional, and it is unjust. With the stroke of just a pen, it stripped women and unborn children of critical legal protections and created rights out of whole cloth. It created an entire abortion industry that preys on women, that's focused more on making a buck than caring for someone in need. All one needs to do is walk into the Planned Parenthood office, seeing the credit card machines, the payment terms, and the focus on profit, and then go into a pregnancy resource center, one of the thousands of pregnancy resource centers in the nation, and see how they provide free care to women, to children, and even women who are post-abortive. The kind of care they provide is amazing. Some say that the court will undermine its illegitimacy if it reverses Roe. We heard one of the justices talk on that in just a few minutes ago. But you know what? The opposite is true. Scholars across the spectrum agree that Roe is not based in history, it's not based in the text, and it is not based in the structure of the Constitution. Even Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg agreed and said the decision was difficult to justify. It's an exercise of raw judicial power. And the New York Times, let me tell you, they got it drastically wrong when they said Roe would be a historical resolution of a fiercely controversial issue. Hardly. For nearly 50 years now, women and their families in our communities have suffered the devastating consequences. Nothing short of legal chaos, which is simply due to a web of legal rules that are nowhere found in the Constitution. We've also seen the moral coarsening of a society that tolerates the discarding of life because someone tells us it's imperfect or inconvenient. And most significantly, we've lost 60 million Americans, many of whom would be thriving in all kinds of respects. Roe is not only unjust, but it is built and supported on lies, absolute lies. The abortion industry depends on those lies to continue. They lie when they say unborn children don't deserve rights. They lie when they say that women can't be equal to men if they don't have abortion. And they lie when they say women can't be successful without it. They lie when they say abortion has no emotional, physical, or spiritual consequences. And they lie when they say Roe can't be overturned. So you know what? Truth will prevail. And I want to tell you this. There are two generations of women and men who are here today, many who have relentlessly prayed and labored and toiled to see the day when Roe is done. And these truth tellers, they will press on with charity and with love until that day comes. Why? Because life is a human right, and healthy and stable societies, we protect human rights. It's as simple as that.
Hello, I'm U.S. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi. As you know, the Supreme Court decisions in Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey essentially established abortion as a woman's constitutional right. This means American women can exercise that right for practically any reason through all 9 months of pregnancy up to the point of birth. This permissive policy makes the United States only one of 7 countries that allows abortion on demand up to the moment of birth. Today, the U.S., along with the likes of China and North Korea, is an extreme outlier in abortion law and policy. My state of Mississippi is trying to bring the United States in line with most every other country around the world, most of whom limit abortion on demand to the first trimester of pregnancy. In 2018, Mississippi enacted a law protecting life starting at 15 weeks, consistent with the international consensus on human rights for the unborn. Abortion activists, many of whom falsely believe ending human life is a fundamental right, attack Mississippi's law as an unbelievable overreach. However, the fact is that our law is still more permissive than many European countries like Austria, Switzerland, and Norway. Our scientific understanding of pregnancy and neonatal care has progressed significantly since the Supreme Court's ill-informed decision in 1973. We now know that premature babies can survive as early as 21 weeks and have the potential to survive sooner. As a legislator, I am confident in saying it is time for our laws to reflect what the rest of the world has already figured out, that life exists before birth and it needs to be protected. This fact underlines Mississippi's case before the Supreme Court. Our case gives the court a monumental opportunity to finally bring our laws into closer alignment with the scientific facts and human rights long recognized by the rest of the world. For updates about this case and to learn more about the legal battle for life, I encourage you to visit adflegal.org/chooselife.
Thanks for watching. We now have Diane Ferraro of Save the Storks here with us today. Thank you so much, Diane, for being here.
Thank you for having me today. It's an honor and a blessing.
Absolutely. Well, let's first start off with you talking a little bit about Save the Storks. Tell us about your organization.
Absolutely. Well, Save the Storks is a national ministry. We're based in Colorado Springs, and we serve women who are facing an unplanned pregnancy. We work with pregnancy resource centers around the United States, and we're best known for our stork buses. We have 63 stork buses around the country in 27 states right now and quickly growing.
Wow. Talk about the stork bus. What is that?
Yes. So the stork bus is a mobile medical unit that is really an ultrasound on wheels. They're staffed with medical professionals. We have licensed nurses, medical directors, and a woman is invited to come on the stork bus. Oftentimes they're parked in front of a Planned Parenthood or near college campuses. And they provide completely free services to that woman so she can have the free ultrasound after she gets the pregnancy test. And then she learns about all of the options for life, for choosing life. And she's really told the truth about what it means to be pregnant, the science behind what she's carrying inside of her.
Do you have any particular client or even a staff member, anybody that you might want to share the story or highlight any of your experiences?
Absolutely. We actually have a client who's based here nearby in Washington, D.C., and she actually came from another country. She was working here in the United States and found out she was pregnant. She was going to abort the baby because she felt there was no way she could afford to have a baby and keep her job, go to school. And the nurse there and one of the priests at the church encouraged her to choose life for her baby. They provided housing for her. They helped her find a job. And the little boy now is 2 years old. His name's Emmanuel because she wanted to celebrate that God was with her. And this little boy is a firecracker. He's so handsome and just such a blessing. And she really had every reason, she thought, to abort her baby. But when she was told the options that she had on that stork bus, she made the decision for life.
Wow. And I'm sure a lot of times you see that ultrasounds make a big difference in the woman choosing life. Can you talk a little bit about the power of the ultrasound and how it plays into what we're talking about surrounding the Dobbs case today?
Absolutely. So, at Planned Parenthood, we've heard time and time again that when that woman goes in for the ultrasound, she doesn't get to hear the heartbeat. She doesn't get to see the images of her baby. So on the stork bus or in a pregnancy center, they are shown the baby. They get to hear the heartbeat. They get to see the baby and learn about the stages of growth. And that is so pivotal because just like what's happened in Texas where women, are now not able to have an abortion after the 6 weeks, they are driving now to other states, including Colorado, to have the abortion. And we just really want those women to get the ultrasound just so they can know the truth about their baby and not listen to the lies, not listen to the rhetoric that they've been told that it's not a baby, that it's just a clump of cells, because we absolutely know without a doubt that it's a baby from that time of conception.
And you are so passionate about the pro-life movement and about serving women. Why is that?
Well, I was adopted as a baby, and I found out just recently that my birth mother, who lives in California, she actually drove to Mexico. I was born before Roe versus Wade in 1967, but when she found out she was pregnant, she was married, had 4 small boys. She drove to Mexico to get an abortion, and she changed her mind. Wow. And she found a couple to adopt me, and I'm so blessed for that. Yes. And, I really feel that women right now, they really need to take that time to pause when they feel like they can't carry the baby, that it's not fitting into their plans. Take that time to pause and just find out what your options are, just like my birth mom did. And adoption is a beautiful option because we feel life is about choice, and choosing life is definitely the best option. I felt it was for me. I've also been a foster and adoptive parent.
Wow.
And many people at Save the Storks have been foster and adoptive parents as well. So we really do go all in for pro-life.
Wow. Well, you've seen all different sides of the pro-life movement then and experienced a lot within the pro-life movement. Do you have, this is the last question I have for you, do you have any message for women that are experiencing an unplanned pregnancy or even post-abortive women that are out there watching today?
Absolutely. I've been getting to know so many women who have had an abortion, who have been in unplanned pregnancies. And I can tell you that time and time again, they say, if I just knew that the 9 months is just such a short time in my life, we want women to know who are facing an unplanned pregnancy that there's 2,700 plus resources around the country, pregnancy resource centers that have options that can help. And if you are post-abortive, please seek help. There's an organization called Support After Abortion. They have so many wonderful recovery programs, and we encourage you to check out their website also.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Diane, for joining us today.
Thank you, Bernadette. I appreciate it.
All right. Let's get back to the show.
My name is Melissa Oden, and I am the result of an unsuccessful abortion. In 1977, my biological mother, a 19-year-old college student, had a saline infusion abortion forced upon her by her mother with the help of a local abortionist. For 5 days in my mother's womb, I soaked in a toxic salt solution intended to poison and scald me to death. When I was delivered in bed by a nurse that 5th day, I was believed to be dead. Weighing a little over 2 pounds, suffering from jaundice and severe respiratory distress, my arrival into this world was not so much as a birth, but an accident, a live birth after a failed abortion. So if I am an unsuccessful abortion, what does a successful abortion mean? Life is the foundation of all other rights. I was almost denied that most basic right from the beginning of my existence. Those who oppose protections for preborn children speak ambiguously about when life begins and what abortion actually does. But the reality is much clearer. Simply put, I am here today because of a failed abortion. Had it been successful, I would not be here. Isn't there something wrong when one person's decision results in another person's death? Policies in our country should be life-affirming, not life-ending. Our government needs to protect the rights of states, to make laws that protect lives like mine, laws that protect the fundamental right to life enshrined in the Bill of Rights. Abortion doesn't just impact a woman's life, it ends a child's life. Somehow along the way, the narrative for abortion survivors got flipped. Our births are accidental, unintended. Our fundamental right to life was nearly taken from us. But my very existence today proves the humanity of living persons in the womb. If we have protection now, we deserve protection then, when we're at our most vulnerable.
Right. You guys, this is a historic day, and I could not be more proud to stand here with you all today, but the millions of Americans who are fighting every single day to protect the lives of those most vulnerable, the unborn. You guys, this moment is one that we need to recognize as a turning point in our country. Can we get an amen? Yes. I am standing here today, the youngest Republican woman in Congress, a fighter for the unborn, because quite frankly, 33 years ago, my mom was faced with an impossible, seemingly impossible decision. The doctors told her, after she had endured a debilitating stroke at the age of 27, that she would never be able to survive childbirth again. And most certainly, the child would not survive. So years went by, and when my mom found herself pregnant, alone, scared, and with no one to stand behind her, not even her own family, with doctors telling her that she would not survive, that the child would not survive, and that abortion was the only choice, my mom, against all odds, she made the bravest decision of all. She chose life. And so today I am here because of a very brave woman who decided that life was worth protecting, that God had a plan, not just for her, but for her unborn daughter. And she was able to deliver a healthy baby girl. And so today, I stand here, someone who was never destined to be in Congress, someone who was never destined to take my first breath. And it's in large part because of the work that every single one of you have done to support and really fight for that critical, most basic tenet that our country is built upon: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But we all know that today we are fighting for who we are as a people and as Americans. And it begins with life. Thank you to every single one of you for being here. Thank you for fighting for all the little girls and all the rights that they deserve as Americans in the womb. Today is the turning point. We will persevere. We will succeed. We will overcome. And we will overturn Roe v. Wade. Right? Thank you so much. Thank you for empowering women. Thank you for being here. And God bless.
Well, I'm motivated by that speech. I hope you are too. But now we have Mallory Quigley of the Susan B. Anthony list with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Mallory.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for being here. Let's first start off with what SBA list is. So tell us a little bit about your organization.
Susan B. Anthony list, we're the nation's largest political pro-life organization. Our mission is to elect pro-life candidates, send them to this building behind us, and to state legislatures across the country so that they can pass laws that reflect the values of the people. We know that the Supreme Court has prevented a lot of lawmakers from doing that. And so we're excited to be here. Susan B. Anthony, a lot of people don't realize, of course, she's famous for fighting for women's right to vote. But she and her compatriots at the time, they also were deeply against abortion. They saw it as an exploitation of women. So she's our namesake, but we support men as well as women candidates.
All right, great. Mm-hmm. Well, tell us a little bit about why it's so important to elect pro-life leaders.
Yeah, well, in order to ensure that children are welcomed and protected under the law, you need to pass pro-life laws. And so it's so important, if you want the right laws passed, you have to elect the right candidates, have the right people in place to do that. So politics is our chosen tool at Susan B. Anthony list to influence the culture and to work to change policy, and it starts with elections. So elections fuel legislation and vice versa. It's a symbiotic circle.
And speaking of that legislation, there's a lot of talk about the Hyde Amendment lately.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about what Susan B. Anthony list has been doing regarding the Hyde Amendment? Maybe
Yes.
even just what the Hyde Amendment is?
Sure, yeah. Well, the Hyde Amendment is longstanding bipartisan policy that prevents our taxpayer dollars from going to abortion on demand. And Congressman Henry Hyde, he's very famous pro-life advocate for many years. He spoke very articulately about, even if you are not necessarily pro-life, a lot of people don't want to be complicit in abortion through taxpayer funding. And it's been something that's been supported by Democrats and Republicans for a long time, though we've seen a dramatic decline in the last few years in Democrats supporting the Hyde Amendment. Of course, very notably, our president, Joe Biden, who used to support the Hyde Amendment, now is all in for abortion on demand up until the moment of birth. And we are working hard in all these upcoming spending bills to make sure that the Hyde Amendment is included. It has to be renewed every year with every spending bill. It's not a law that you pass once and it's a language that needs to be added to all the funding bills.
Absolutely. And since you mentioned the Biden administration, what are we seeing from the Biden administration other than recusing their support of the Hyde Amendment? What else are we seeing from them?
Oh, Bernadette, this is the most pro-abortion administration in our nation's history. And we thought that about the Obama-Biden administration. But, we never before even President Obama did not attack the Hyde Amendment. That's really very indicative of how pro-abortion an administration is, because for so long, Democrats saw Hyde as a place where Democrat legislators could compromise. They could vote their conscience, for example, and support Hyde in order to prevent taxpayer funding of abortion. But this administration has gone against that. They're pushing taxpayer funding of abortion here and overseas. And of course, just think back to the Democratic primary. Our now current Vice President, Kamala Harris, it was her idea to have a Justice Department that would pre-clear state laws, a complete violation of the democratic process and the system of, the balance between the federal and state governments. She wants state legislators to have to pre-clear their laws to make sure that they're compliant with Roe versus Wade. So this entire administration, we've seen them go after Texas. We've seen them, what they stand for with regards to the Mississippi law. If they do not get a pro-abortion decision from the Supreme Court in this case, we know that they've threatened to pack the court to try and dilute what's been done and to change it. So, unfortunately, this is the most pro-abortion administration we've ever seen.
Yes, unfortunately so. And it's not just at the federal level that we're seeing this as well, but also at the local and state levels too. So what are we seeing from the pro-abortion side and the pro-life side on the local and state levels?
Okay, so I think the most important thing to realize is that more than 500 pro-life bills were introduced in state legislatures this year alone.
Wow.
And 100 of those, at least, have been enacted into law. So clearly there is momentum on the part of pro-life lawmakers across the states. People are realizing that we've got to make a change. This issue is not settled in the hearts and minds of the American people, which is why we're hoping the Supreme Court's going to take the handcuffs off the states and allow them to enforce those laws that they've already passed. And so, the pro-abortion side is fighting just as hard. In some states, they're working to codify Roe versus Wade, to create a permanent right to abortion in their state constitutions, so that if anything changes at the court level, that trickles down to the states, that they've got a permanent pro-abortion state. So, in fact, if we get the decision that we're hoping for with the Supreme Court, the state fights and the local fights are going to become that much more important. The pro-life movement is going to have to grow. It's going to expand by 50. And of course, there's already amazing work that's being done at the state level, but we'll have a real opportunity as a movement to actually enforce those pro-life laws that we've been working so hard to pass at the state level since Roe versus Wade.
And just one last question for you before we have to move on to our next segment.
Sure.
What message do you have for young people out there that are looking to get involved in the pro-life movement?
Yeah. Well, I work for a political organization. I very much enjoy getting involved in politics. And I would say to young people, this is a real way to change. The pro-life movement, it takes all kinds. We have our sidewalk counselors. We have people working in crisis pregnancies on the centers on the front lines of the movement. We also need people working to change law and policy to impact, in a fell swoop, a whole group of people. So changing law, that does save lives. It changes culture. So get involved in politics and make sure you know who's representing you and how they're voting.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Mallory.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, let's get back to the show. We've got another video up next for you.
Hello, my name is Becky Curry. I'm a registered nurse and a proud representative of the 92nd District in the Mississippi House of Representatives. In 2018, I sponsored a bill called the Gestational Age Act to protect innocent unborn lives after 15 weeks in the womb. With bipartisan support from the people of Mississippi, the bill passed and was signed into law by then Governor Phil Bryant. But the law was blocked in federal court by judges who said it violated the precedent of Roe v. Wade. And Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the Supreme Court decision which legalized abortion throughout the country and severely limited states' ability to restrict or regulate it. Now, this important law is headed to the Supreme Court for further review. In 1973, the Supreme Court claimed to have discovered a right to abortion in the Constitution which no one had ever noticed before. Not only did that decision strip unborn children of the right to life, it stripped individual states of the right to protect life in the womb, to protect the health and well-being of a pregnant mother, and to protect the integrity of the medical profession. But the Bill of Rights declares that powers not given to the federal government by the Constitution are reserved to the states or the people. So inventing this new right to abortion, the court ignored the long-standing rights of individual states. This flawed and unconstitutional precedent has stood for nearly 50 years too long, but we are hoping to change it. The last 50 years have brought great advances in our scientific understanding of preborn human life. We know that children are amazingly developed much earlier in pregnancy than we once thought in 1973. By week 15, unborn children have every major organ. They can taste what their mom eats, they feel pain, and they suck their thumbs. In most countries, abortion laws are consistent with these scientific realities and protect vulnerable life, but not in America. The Supreme Court now has a chance to restore the rights that Roe v. Wade cast aside. State legislators like me are elected to enact the will of their constituents and serve the best interests of our local communities through common sense laws like the Gestational Age Act. In Mississippi, the will of the people is clear. We want to protect life. It's vital that the Supreme Court clear the way.
Everyone's families today. Our next speaker is Marjorie Dannon-Felser, president of Susan B. Anthony List. Please welcome her.
I would stand up on this, but I'm so sure that I'm going to fall, so I'm not going to do that, and I'm short. Wow, beautiful pro-life movement. It's very hard to see from standing in here. But what a beautiful group of people. If I could have you all over to my house, I would just invite you over to live among you in the years that I've been involved in the pro-life movement has changed me in such beautiful ways. I'm so, so grateful. I want to tell you one thing that I'm 100% sure of, having gotten to know Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Victoria Woodhull. Now, I can't say that I'm that old, but I have gotten to know them very personally, at least through what I know about them. And if they were here, I know where they would be standing. They would not be standing over there. They would be standing right here among the beautiful pro-life, human rights-centered, new pro-life generation that this is. Friends, life is truly the human rights battle of our time. And from abolition to suffrage to the civil rights movement, people like you have stepped into the breach throughout history to address those wrongs. The pioneers of the women's movement clearly understood the violence and oppression that abortion was for women, and they adamantly opposed it to a person. Victoria Woodhull, the first woman to run for president, said that abortion exists, that this cruelty exists, is evidence that there is a great wrong in our culture among us, and that she has been wronged. Susan B. Anthony, in her newspaper, in her newspaper called The Revolution said, "The act of abortion will burden her conscience in life. It will burden her soul in the grave. But thrice guilty is the one who drove her to the dreadful deed." Planned Parenthood. After half a century of abortion on demand and Roe versus Wade and 63 million children, impossible to fathom in our limited minds, but think of the one missing person and the effect of that and the ripple effects of losing that person. The countless wounded mothers and the brokenness and the suffering that radiates through our culture because of each one of these acts. We cannot possibly imagine it. Perhaps we'll understand it in heaven. But what you've done is you've stepped up. You've stepped up to empower women, and that's why this rally is Empower Women, Promote Life. Empower women, promote life. I would have stood over there when I was in college, and now I stand here. And I want to tell you, I'm looking at your faces now, and the love that comes from the heart of this movement is impossible to miss. The need from that movement is also impossible to miss. And they need our love. They need invitation. And so we should invite them in our prayers, and I invite them now to join this beautiful movement. If there's anything that anybody has heard today on the other side of that fence that piques the conscience, as Susan B. Anthony said, that piques their conscience, take a step over that fence. Do like Abby Johnson did. Do like so many of my friends in this group did, and come on over and join us in the human rights movement of this day that is where love lives and love lets live. So instead of leading on human rights, the United States of America for the last 50 years has been a purveyor of the undermining of human rights. And look at the rest of the world. In 39 out of 42 European countries, 39 out of 42 European countries have more restrictive laws, more helpful laws than Mississippi's laws that is being considered today. So an opportunity so great like the one that we have right now doesn't come very often. This day has been hard won. This is America's chance to step back from the brink of being the purveyor of horrible human rights violations, not just here, but all over the world. So to turn the page back on this horrible chapter is what we need to do to move into a new, beautiful, and humane era for this country and for the rest of the world. One where every child, every mother is embraced in the law and served by us in terms of every need that they have. We urge the Supreme Court to listen to those better angels. We say to the court, don't flinch. This moment is a long time in the making. This is not the time to stumble. This is not the time to worry about what the world thinks. This is a time to focus on the gift of our founding documents, what's embedded in those, and let those be the aspirations of each Supreme Court justice. They are bound to do that in their oath. We beg that they not forget that oath. I'm proud to join Attorney General Fitch, such an incredible champion, and all the modern standard bearers of authentic feminism, all of you that I'm looking at right now. And as we carry on what is the best about the American tradition, standing for unalienable rights, standing for the marginalized, standing for truth, standing for life. Thanks so much.
My name is Bill West, and this is my wife, Betsy. We're from Washington, Pennsylvania, which is southwest of Pittsburgh. And we're here because we believe it is time for this travesty of abortion to be finally ended in our country. We've seen too much bloodshed, over 60 million babies aborted, and it's just time for this to go away. We believe that we cannot enjoy God's blessing while we abort babies. It's just impossible.
Tell me something.
have you noticed? I've noticed a lot of young folks are out here. How does that make you feel to see that?
Well, I tell you the truth, being grandparents, this makes us feel extremely excited because we've heard these young people say they want to be the first post-Roe generation. And it's, it would be wonderful because most of these kids have never lived in a country where abortion was not legal. And they want to see it, they just want to see the end of this also.
My name is Micah Howell, and I'm from Manassas, Virginia. And we came to the Supreme Court today because I wanted to just instill in my children what's really important in life, and that is to choose life. So that's why we're here.
And why this particular case?
Because this could overturn the Roe versus Wade, and something that's been going on for 50 years that is evil, and we want to see evil overturned.
How important is that message to especially the younger generation?
Oh, they're the next ones to fight it, so it's very important.
My name is Kongmin Lee. It's like Kingman, but you switch the I and the A. I live in Atlanta, Georgia right now, and right now I'm with Students for Life as a senior ambassador. The reason why I'm here today is because I'm fighting for life. I believe that our culture today has been permeated by the spirit of death, but I am fighting for a culture for life because right now there's nothing more important than to fight for the most innocent and defenseless among us, which is our babies. Right now there's an attack on our children. The demons are coming for our children, but physically they are killing over 2,000 babies every single day. Since Roe v. Wade was passed and was ruled, over 62 million innocent babies have been brutally slaughtered, their limbs torn apart. It's very, very graphic. And not only that, it hurts women and it enables men to exploit women. And for me as a man, I believe that it is our responsibility to provide and protect for the most vulnerable in society. And right now, that is our baby. So today, we have the oral arguments for the Dobbs case, the first direct challenge to Roe v. Wade since Casey, and it is monumental. We're seeing history in the making, and for me to be a part of this, it is such an honor, but I'm so glad to be out here, and it's such a privilege to fight for life, because again, there's nothing more important, no human rights issue more important than to fight for babies today.
Well, welcome back. We are here with Frederick Douglass Foundation's Reverend Dean Nelson. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you.
Well, first, I'm going to start off with, tell us about a little bit about your organization.
So, Frederick Douglass Foundation was started about 11 years ago, and our tagline is righteousness, justice, liberty, and virtue. We're a grassroots group, about 14 chapters, state chapters across the country that really advocate for righteousness, justice, liberty, and virtue.
Now, abortion does have a disproportionate impact on minority communities. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's true. Although, generations ago, my grandmother's generation, black women were the least likely to get an abortion. But today, an African-American woman is the most likely. Probably almost 40% of abortions today are performed on African-American women. Wow. And up to 70% of surgical abortion facilities from Planned Parenthood can be found in minority neighborhoods.
Wow, wow. Now, that's very unfortunate, but I know that we have a very positive outlook on the pro-life movement and on the work that you're doing. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe some of the strategies that you've used that you've seen a very positive impact on changing hearts and minds about the reality of abortion?
That's a great question. One of the things, as a minister of the gospel, we argue from the aspect of the Bible. And most African Americans are church-going people, and the Bible still has relevance. So that's one of the things that we highlight is the moral foundation. Secondly, we talk about the disproportionate impact. So there's a eugenic aspect. Many black Americans and white Americans still are unaware that Margaret Sanger, who was the founder of Planned Parenthood, wrote that letter in 1939 to Clarence Gamble saying that we don't want word to go out, that we want to exterminate the Negro population. So some of those are the strategies within education that we try to help let people really know what abortion is and its devastating impact on our community.
And speaking of the devastating impact that abortion has had on our community, now let's take it back to the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization case. Yes. Why is this so important for Frederick Douglass Foundation, and what kind of impact do you see it having on your organization?
No, it's hugely important because we believe that Roe versus Wade was wrongly decided, and obviously it has had a huge impact on the African American community. Broadly, we know over 60 million children have lost their lives to abortion since 1973. And this case is of particular interest because of the racist history that Mississippi has. And so people don't know the story of Fannie Lou Hamer, who was a civil rights activist from Mississippi, and who in 1961, a white doctor performed a hysterectomy without her knowledge. And that was something that was so common in Mississippi at the time that it was called Mississippi appendectomy. Over 600 people were sterilized during a eugenics program in Mississippi. So this case has huge ramifications for the sanctity of human life, but also because it can reverse kind of the curse that has happened in Mississippi.
Absolutely. Well, one last question for you. Why are you pro-life?
Wow. I became pro-life. I didn't realize I was pro-life. I became pro-life as a student at the University of Virginia when someone asked me what I thought about abortion, and I replied to that person, well, it's legal, so I guess it's okay. And the young pro-lifer said, well, slavery was legal. Did that make it okay? And so ever since that point in time, I reevaluated my position and understood that the sanctity of human life is a position that all Christians should have, but also it was a issue of humanity. And we've seen in the past where the court has decided wrongly in cases in our history, and we hope that it will be an opportunity for it to reverse itself on this most important human issue for our day.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Reverend.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. God bless you.
All righty. Now, up next, we have a video that we released just last week. But if you haven't checked it out, this is all about the joys and struggles of life and motherhood. This is our Worth It ad.
It's gonna be so hard. I don't know if it's worth it.
Hey, it'll be okay. It's gonna be hard. I don't feel ready.
Don't worry. It's worth it.
Please welcome Congressman Steve Scalise, House Republican Whip.
Well, how are y'all doing? What a beautiful day this is, but what a consequential day this is. This is our moment. When you look out and you see all of these people who for decades have been marching for life, who've been standing up for life, who've been working to elect pro-life elected officials at the state houses, here in Congress. This is our moment. It's days like today that we all do that work. I want to first thank every one of you who came here today to stand up for life, and I want to thank all of those people, millions of people around this country who have been standing up for life for decades, who have been working since Roe v. Wade to right that wrong. Today is our day. This is what we've been working for. When you look across the street at the Capitol, we've been trying. Every House Republican supports the Born Alive Act that says if a baby's born alive outside the womb, you can't kill that baby and call it abortion. Do you know we don't have one single taker on the Democrat side to support that bill over in the House? Elections have consequences. It's why we need to keep working. But we also work to elect pro-life presidents. And Donald Trump made 3 great appointments to the Supreme Court. There was a day when you had judges that thought that this document was something they could just take out a pen and rewrite at their own will. That's not how our founding fathers set up this Constitution. It's supposed to be interpreted based on how it was written. Let's pray that today these justices are hearing this case and remembering that of the 3 inalienable rights that are listed in the Constitution, the first right is life. Life is why we're here. Life is why we march. It's why we show up. Today is our day. God bless every one of you. Pray for the Supreme Court to make the right decision. Let's have this Mississippi law upheld. My colleagues here from Mississippi did their work. In states like Louisiana, my home state, we're proud to have pro-life legislatures that have already passed laws. There are at least a dozen states that have laws on the books today that if this case in Mississippi is upheld, those states get to defend life immediately in ways that they weren't prior to today. So this isn't just about Mississippi today. This is about protecting life all across America. God bless every one of you. Let's continue to stand up for life.
Great job. Thank you. I want you to know he's holding a copy of the Constitution in his hand. And last time I checked, there was no right to abortion in the Constitution. They're making the case inside the court today. I want to introduce to you Representative Vicki Hartzler. She is the co-chair of the House Pro-Life Caucus dedicated to fighting for life. Welcome, Representative Hartzler.
Hey, thank you. What a historic day for the past 48 years. Every day, thousands of future Americans have been snuffed out due to abortion. Individuals who could have been our neighbors, scientists who discovered cures for cancer, Alzheimer's, and other diseases, teachers who made a difference in the lives of hurting children, firefighters who saved your family's life, truck drivers who are key to the supply chain, workers who will be paying into the soon-to-be bankrupt Social Security system, all have been denied the right to life, and we are worse off because of it. Over 62 million American lives have been taken. It is wrong. It is tragic. It is heartbreaking, but that can all change today. Thanks to the wise actions of the Mississippi Pro-Life Legislature and the courageous leadership of Mississippi General Lynn Finch and her amazing legal team, the U.S. Supreme Court will have the opportunity to right a wrong, to declare that the U.S. Constitution does not grant a right to abortion. They have the opportunity to chart a new path for our nation, one that affirms what our founders declared, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, including the right to life. We need every little boy, every little girl, every future man and woman to have the chance to live. There are no expendable people. An unplanned pregnancy doesn't make that unborn life any less valuable. The circumstances of a pregnancy do not determine that person's destiny. God has a plan and a purpose for everyone. Every life is valuable and deserves to live. Today's case will affirm that. It can allow unborn babies whose heart is beating, who can feel pain, hiccup, swallow, suck their thumbs, respond to touch, and jump when startled, to be protected. Today's case can support the majority of Americans who don't support abortion late in the development. Today's case can put us in alignment with the rest of the world's abortion laws protecting life after 15 weeks. Today's case can right the wrong and birth a new day in America, one with possibilities, hope, and promise. The fate is in the hand of 9 justices and a praying nation. So today, at this historic moment where life stands literally in the balance, we're reminded of the powerful and convicting words Moses spoke to the nation of Israel, and declare the same charge to the 9 justices who are hearing these arguments and who hold the fate of thousands of lives in their hands. This day, I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you that I have set before you life and death. Now, choose life. Let it be so. Amen.
Thank you so much, Representative Hartzler. What a great advocate for life. All right, I told you I'm from New Jersey. Is there anyone here from New Jersey? Woo! All right, well, please welcome a man who I trust knows good pizza, good bagels, and we know he loves babies, Representative Chris Smith.
Thank you so very much. It is pizza time. First of all, thank you to Mississippi for their tremendous leadership. And thank you, each and every one of you, for being here, for your prayers, your advocacy at home, as well as here on Capitol Hill and before the Supreme Court. You know, my friends, injustice need not be forever. By affirming the Mississippi law, the Supreme Court can make a powerful step towards inclusion and justice and respect for the weakest and most vulnerable. As we all know, in 1973, the Supreme Court abandoned women and babies to what is now a multi-billion-dollar abortion industry. Shockingly, since the infamous 73 decisions, and Vicki just mentioned it a moment ago, more than 62.5 million babies have been killed by abortion, a staggering loss of life in children's lives that equates with the entire population of Italy. Abrogating both duty and due diligence, the 1973 court wrote, and I quote, "We need not resolve the difficult question of when human life begins." Really? Sidestepping that threshold question and giving no benefit of the doubt.
Thanks again for joining us. We have Dave Cortman of Alliance Defending Freedom. He is the VP of U.S. Litigation and Senior Counsel. Thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's first talk about what happened today in oral arguments. Who did we hear from today?
Yeah, so it was an interesting argument, but first it was the Attorney General's office of the state of Mississippi. Ms. Fitch is the Attorney General. Her Solicitor General, Scott Stewart, did a great job. We had the ability to moot him a couple of weeks ago, really did a fantastic job. And then, of course, sadly, the United States Solicitor General, acting Solicitor General, went in on the side of the abortion clinic, and of course they had their own advocate in the case today.
Wow. Well, you've argued many a case before the Supreme Court. Can you tell us what kind of preparation goes into arguing before the justices?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of preparation. What's interesting is, especially on a case like this, it has possibilities of being historic depending on what the court decides, but there's a ton of preparation because not only do you have to know the facts of this case and the law surrounding this case, but you have to go back and read all the precedent since not only Roe versus Wade in 1973 and Casey case you'll hear a lot about, but even before that, what's the history and tradition? When we're talking about the right to abortion, whether it's in the Constitution, one of the things that looked at is the text of the Constitution, which of course doesn't say anything about abortion, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then of course you go back to history history and tradition, and the idea of abortion was not only not permitted in most of the states, but it should be a state issue. And of course, we'll discuss that a little bit.
All right. Well, what were the justices concerned most about today?
So it was interesting. So a couple things. So one of the things that stood out to me was some of the justices on the left. They were talking about this issue of, well, we don't want this to appear to be a political decision because we have some new members to the court. So they were specifically poking the new members, and so we don't want to justify overturning precedent because of that reason. But I think that was a little bit unfair, and the reason I say that is it really doesn't have a lot to do with the new justices of the Supreme Court. It has more to do with a case precedent that was created out of whole cloth in the first place. So if you look at the text of the Constitution, there's no right to abortion anywhere in there. In fact, what was interesting, the question that was asked, and I think Justice Sotomayor responded, she said it was discerned from the Constitution, what basically means it's not in there, but we figured we'd put it in there. And so that was one of the big issues I was looking at, because they were saying, well, we don't want this to look political. The problem is the case originally was political in 1973 because it was not based on the text of the Constitution. It was not based on history and tradition. So overturning that really puts it back to the place it should have been, and we should have never gone there in the first place in 1973.
Wow. Well, do you have any sort of last message, or do you want to highlight anything else from oral arguments that you saw today?
Yeah, I thought a couple things stood out to me. The chief, it was interesting, he asked some questions about the actual issue in the case about viability. And so he said, well, aren't we talking here about the question presented in the case is whether restrictions on abortions before viability are always unconstitutional. So it looked like the chief was going back to the question of viability, leaving in question whether he's willing to overturn Roe and Casey. So I think that's one thing that stood out to me. I think the other thing is Justice Kavanaugh made some good points, and he said, isn't the Constitution silent about the right of abortion? Whether you're pro-life or whether you're pro-choice, the Constitution has nothing to say about that. And so shouldn't we put the issue back to the states? And then they get to decide through their legislatures on a state-by-case basis. And I think that's exactly the point. I think this is obviously an emotional issue. I think people have feelings strongly on both sides of it. But I think if you cut it down to the core, the Constitution is silent about any such, so-called right to abortion. And I think the answer would be, if the court does rule properly, what it does is it sends the case back to the states, and the states get to decide on a case-by-case basis what their state constitution and their state laws have to say.
All right. Well, Dave, thank you so much for all of that insight. Thank you for being here today. Now, before we see the Mississippi Attorney General and her team walk out of the court, let's take a moment to pray.
Hi, my name is Angie Reister, and I work at Alliance Defending Freedom. It is such an honor to join you on this historic day. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we praise you that you see, hear, and act. Your arm is not too short to save, nor your ears dull to hear the prayers of your people. Father, we repent for the scourge of abortion in our nation, and we humbly ask for your forgiveness and your mercy. We know how much you love children from the moment of conception throughout their entire lives. Let us honor you by protecting the lives of the unborn. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. For those who walk in darkness, may they be overwhelmed by the greatness of your love and light. We love you, Lord. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor of a lifetime to introduce to you a woman who is fighting to overturn Roe, Attorney General of Mississippi, Lynn Fitch.
Wow, what an amazing day, right? Wow. Thank you all so very much for being here. This is incredible. You can feel the compassion, the love of God who has us here to protect those unborn children and their mothers. Thank you for demonstrating hope for a better tomorrow, for the love and the compassion that we have for the women and their children who deserve better than abortion. Over the past 50 years, our world has changed. Technology's changed, science has changed, and certainly we know that life can be detected in the womb much earlier. As things have changed, the roles of men and women have been altered. The workplace has changed.
all for the positive. It's been much easier for women to balance their professional life and their success at home. But society has made those changes, but yet with Roe v. Wade, we've not been able to incorporate those changes. But now, hopefully, we can. Roe v. Wade made it impossible. It is time that our laws caught up. No question about it. This gives us the opportunity for the first time to have the strong dialogue about protecting our unborn precious children and their mothers. You know, as a single working mother of 3 beautiful children, I completely understand. I know it's going to be hard. We've still got some challenges. But now for the first time, we recognize that it's time for our laws to move with society and make it much easier for our mothers to be successful. You know, this is a wonderful opportunity to return this to the people, to us, all of us, the people. The Constitution gives us the right. We are ready and willing and able to do the job. Returning it back to the states to have the abortion policy-making decision to us, to the people. And again, we are so prepared for that. You know, it's been a long time coming. We know there are hard choices and there are no easy answers. But for the first time, we truly are having the conversation of how we make it in a positive way for the mothers, for their children. And so I thank you for all of the hard work that each of you've done. This has been a tremendous team effort. And I thank you for the hard work you're going to continue to do in a post-Roe v. Wade world. Thank you for supporting women who are going to have to make tough, difficult decisions. Thank you for working with your elected leaders, your elected legislators and governors to make sure that laws are passed that both empower women and promote life. Thank you so very much, but God bless each of you.
All right, to finish off our show today, we have CEO and President of Alliance Defending Freedom with us, Mike Ferris. Mike, thank you so much for joining us again today.
Well, you're welcome, and I'm thrilled at what happened up at the court. It's just
wonderful.
That's great.
Wonderful. Now, you've attended a lot of Supreme Court oral arguments before you've even argued yourself in front of the Supreme Court. What makes this one different?
Well, the stakes are so high. I mean, the process is a little different. The COVID process the court has adopted has changed the nature of oral argument considerably. It's much longer than normal. It seems appropriate that they spend effectively 2 hours listening to something this important. Normally it's just 1 hour, very hard and fast on the time limit. So they spent a lot more time. There were a lot more questions. It was a little calmer because of the new protocols in terms of the speed of the questions. Justice Breyer still asks very long questions. He did to me. He does to everybody. And so, but you listen to these arguments to try to kind of get a signal of where the court's going. And no one can tell for sure. But I am thrilled beyond thrilled. First of all, I would say Scott Stewart, the Solicitor General of Mississippi, did an absolutely fabulous job. He was bold, he was polite, he was eloquent, he knew the answers to the questions, he gave good, strong answers to the questions, he drove it home, and so he did a great job. But what you're really listening for are the justices' statements and questions, and they look great to me. I couldn't be happier as to what I've heard. There's no guarantee of the outcome, but I could not be happier at this moment.
Absolutely. Well, we see that both the pro-life and the pro-choice sides are really taking this seriously. Is that because we really could see a significant change in our abortion laws?
Well, I think that the argument seemed to be saying that the judges all knew that some partial measure was not really the issue. The issue is, are we going to keep Roe or are we going to jettison Roe? That was the whole deal, Roe and Casey, because Casey kind of fixed Roe in some respects, changed it a little bit. So if you take them in tandem, Roe and Casey. And the left-leaning members of the court, the more liberal judges on the court, the more conservative judges on the court, all seem to be asking questions that went to the ultimate question. And so that tells us that the court itself is not thinking about halfway measures very much. There were a few questions about that, but they were mostly focused on the big questions, the big picture. Are we going to keep Roe or are we going to jettison Roe? And, of course, we think that what Justice Kavanaugh was saying is exactly right, that this should be decided by the state legislatures, that the Supreme Court has no authority to decide the question one way or the other. This is left to the states. The Constitution has nothing about the right to an abortion, and therefore it's left to the states.
Wow, well, this is great news, but what can we realistically expect as an outcome from the court?
Reversing Roe.
Wow.
Is that a guarantee? No. But I think that's the question they're going to answer.
Wow.
Do we reverse Roe? Yes or no? That's going to be the question. I don't think you're going to see halfway measures on this particular case.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, what kinds of messages have you been seeing from the pro-life and the pro-choice sides throughout this whole Dobbs versus Jackson discussion?
Well, the pro-choice side, if you will, is making the same old arguments that they've always made, and that is that women should have the right to terminate pregnancy because it's too bothersome for them for a variety of factors. Some are more important than others, but the regime of Roe allows them to effectively abort their babies for all 9 months of pregnancy as long as some doctor is willing to say, well, she'd be really upset if she had to have the baby. That's what Roe boils down to effectively. But what Mississippi was arguing and the pro-life community was arguing is that the women's rights are important, the women's interests are important, but they are not the only interest on the table. And there's nothing more important than preserving the right of the child. And when you balance inconvenience against death, that's a pretty easy balance to say how the balance should come out. And so, inconvenience, hardship, however you want to label it, unless the life of the mother is at stake, you don't have two lives at issue here. You have other interests. And so I think Mississippi has correctly balanced it. I know Mississippi will not be content with remaining at 15 weeks. If they're free to do so, they'll adopt a completely pro-life standard.
Wow.
And so as a number of states have such laws already on the books, just waiting for Roe to be gone.
Wow. Now, I'm sure our audience is wondering when we can expect a ruling from the court.
Well, I think it's going to be, the traditional answer is it's going to be in late June because that's when the court's term is over and they have to release their decision by then. I don't know, there was just something about the oral argument today that made me believe that maybe they're going to go a little sooner than that. I mean, that could be, that's the weakest of my predictions here. Keep in mind, I don't have the gift of prophecy. In fact, I've been running nonprofit organizations for 40 years, so I'm really nonprofit. But there was just something about it that just made me think, you know what, they might just wind this up sooner rather than later, and they certainly could. The court will almost certainly assign it for an opinion to be written this week, so they'll make an initial decision probably Friday, and they will. If the Chief Justice is voting with the majority, he will assign the opinion to someone to write it. If he's not with the majority, then whoever the most senior justice is, Justice Thomas is, of course, the most senior justice on the court, so he could be assigning the opinion. He could decide to write it himself. He could assign it to Justice Barrett. Any number of options could happen. So, but then the battle will go back and forth of whether they can get somebody to go off the majority opinion and make it a 4 votes or fewer writing a single opinion. That would really muddy the waters. Wow. And so we need to make sure that 5 votes don't just vote for the outcome, but vote for a particular opinion, because that's what changes a precedent, is a particular opinion must be there to change a precedent.
Wow. Do you have any last thoughts for our audience before we close out our show today?
My last thoughts, whenever I'm going to be asked about this for the next several months, is pray, because it's not over until the opinion's released. And so if you think that the case is over now, you don't understand the process. The case is really live, and there's going to be bickering back and forth, and there's going to be efforts to get people to change. There's going to be all kinds of movement, all inside the court. This won't be external to the court. This is between justices. And so it's really, really important that people continue to pray until the moment the decision's released. Pray after the decision's released, as I think I said earlier, but it'll just be a different prayer request. But if you wanted a day to celebrate, today's the day.
Wow. Well, this is exciting. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mike. And thank you for joining us this whole time. Now be sure to stay up to date on this case and any of our other ADF cases on our website, adflegal.org, and of course our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and be sure to use the hashtag #LifeIsAHumanRight. Thanks so much for tuning in. God bless.